A warm welcome to the first hour here on the Newsroom. I'm Elvis Preslin.
And I'm Kendall Makamati.
Jumbo Africa. For all our viewers in South Africa as well as on the continent, we'll be with you until 12 o'clock. Now, today, a very disturbing story, Kendall. Increase in gang violence, especially on the Cape Flats. That's what we focus on today.
No, it's been coming for some time that we'll look at what has happened with gang violence. We've had a few conversations right here on the show, but unfortunately we have to revisit that story again, and we'd like to get you involved in the conversation.
And how gang violence really affects children, our children and adolescents, and why they are joining these gangs. And that's why we're asking this question on our poll today.
We'd like to find out from you, in our question of the day, what are your views relating to young people joining gangs?
Well, that's the question today, not the poll, and let's take a look at what you are telling us. This one from Vincent Stewart says, young people want to belong and be acknowledged, and the absence of this in the family makes them to seek others who make them feel wanted. Well, Vincent Stewart, you sound almost like a psychologist, exactly what my thoughts are.
Yes, Mamani says, I blame unemployment and the police, because if the police were doing their jobs, these kids would be scared to join these gangs.
Well, there you have it. These are some of your comments already. You can keep them coming, read them as we continue. But we also focus on another issue. Sean Abrams, he was in Parliament yesterday. He's asking for more money to do his job at the NPA, Kendall.
Very interesting. And we want to find out from you at home, what do you think? Should the government give the National Prosecution Authority an additional 100 million rand?
That's the question on the poll. So far, we got 216 votes. And 80% of you in South Africa and on the continent of Africa are suggesting that 100 million rand should not be given to the NPA to do their job. Only 20% are saying yes.
An additional 100 million rand, mind you. Let's see what's being said about the matter. What are your reasons for this?
Maya Baby says we have people who are unemployed. Create jobs with that money and distribute the jobs evenly amongst the Rainbow Nation, all races in South Africa.
Michael Bigham's-Toiler says yes, because they're one of the few departments that are doing well. And if our poorly managed flyers say, hey, can be bailed out, clearly not.
Well, if they're doing well, we are waiting for a number of arrests and perhaps investigations that is not taking place.
Absolutely, and that's exactly why we want to get your opinions on the matter. What do you think? Should they be getting that extra money or not?
But we're also talking sports this morning, Kendall. Yeah. Yes, FIFA. Hey, Bafana is in trouble, it seems like.
Yeah, FIFA's just joined the fray, and when it rains, it pours for Bafana, because it seems they might not even make it onto that plane, because that match, you know that match that Sheikh Pashab was fired after? That match against Senegal, that 2-1 win? Well, FIFA has ordered that match to be replayed after having banned the referee from match fixing. I want to find out from you, has FIFA's decision just sunk Bafana's chances of making it to Russia 2018?
Well, let's take a look at what you are telling us. Michael Big M says, I'm not happy with FIFA's decision, but regardless of that, Bafana was going nowhere slowly. They made their bed, and now they must lie in it. So says Michael Big M Sotole.
And we've got another one coming in. This one from Ramgondo says, this is very unacceptable. What happened to the referee's decision is final. Well, if the referee gets banned for match fixing, maybe that's when that comes in. Lots of games were influenced by referees. Henry's handball goal, for example.
And who can forget Maradona's The Hand of God? But that's many, many years ago.
Oh, yes.
But that's where we got to leave it. It's time now to take a look at your news headlines. The National Prosecuting Authority wants an additional 100 million rand in order to continue its operations. EFF leader Julius Malema says that he doesn't need anybody's permission to attend the funeral service of the former ANC Youth League Secretary General, Sendiso Magata. And Ferocious winds from Hurricane Irma have flattened the Dutch Caribbean island of St. Martin's, killing at least 6 people and destroying an airport. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall what's happening in the news as well as in the sports news.
Elvis, thanks very much. There's quite a lot happening in the world of sports, and before I give you the news, let's make sure that you know what I will be bringing you once we do the sports. FIFA orders the World Cup qualifier between South Africa and Senegal, played in November last year, to be replayed after it banned the referee for match fixing.
More of a hometown decision. Lumpty Dumpty.
I don't think it's for lack of opportunities. I don't think it's for lack of intensity. I don't think it's for lack of effort. The attitudes have been good, so I can't really fault. Sometimes in football, it doesn't always go like that for you.
Gavin Hunt is hoping for a bit of luck when he faces his protege Benny McCarthy in their second leg MTN8 semi-final tie.
Del Potro's back in the US Open semi-finals.
Argentine Juan Martín Del Potro denies the tennis world the match it had been anticipating as he saves 2 set points against Roger Federer to set up a semi-final against another crowd favorite, Rafael Nadal.
Well, I played him in 2009 too, and, as the same Rogers, and hopefully I can repeat the result.
Right, that is what we've got for you in the sports, but let me bring you the top stories for the day. Good morning, I'm Kendall Makhamate, and you're watching Newsroom. Now, National Director of Public Prosecutions, Sean Abraham, says the National Prosecuting Authority wants an additional 100 million rand in order to continue its operations. Abrahams also addressed several other issues with the Justice Portfolio Committee, including state capture investigations and Grace Mugabe.
The NPA is falling short of meeting its performance targets. Abrahams blames this on the critical shortage of investigative and prosecutorial capacity within the NPA. It's already lost 55 staffers since April. An additional 157 officials left the prosecutorial authority during the 2016-2017 financial year.
We're sitting in a situation where there are currently 45 critical posts that we have to fill now as a matter of urgency. As a second phase to that, there's another 112 posts that we've got to have those posts advertised within the next few weeks.
Abrahams also briefed MPs on the state of the investigations into state capture.
The first leg is, of course, what we refer to as the mentor investigation. The second leg is the Jonas investigation. The third leg is the Government Communications Information System and the New Age investigation. The fourth leg relates to the allegations of Eskom and Tegeta. The fifth leg relates to the allegations in respect of Transnet and Trillion. The sixth leg relates to the allegations in respect of Denal and the VR laser investigation.
The NPA boss also says he believes that Zimbabwean First Lady Grace Mugabe should have been charged for the alleged assault of a young woman at a Sandton hotel last month. Lukhanya Kalada, SABC News, Parliament.
Economic Freedom Fighter Commander-in-Chief Julius Malema says he will attend the funeral of former ANC Youth League Secretary-General Sindiso Magaka. However, a thorough security assessment will need to be done. Malema was speaking after he graduated with a BA Honours in Philosophy at UNISA in Pretoria.
Still reeling from the pain of Magaka's passing away, Malema says he would like to pay his respects and find peace following the trauma he suffered at the news of his death. But he has raised security concerns about attending Magaka's funeral.
I will attend his funeral if conditions allow, because in that funeral, and what is more painful about politics is that the people who kill you are the ones who are going to preside over your funeral and use your funeral to popularize themselves. So we ought to be careful about that. Only when conditions allow, we'll attend Makakra's funeral.
Malema says Makakra was killed for standing against corruption. He expressed his frustration at what he called a stunt by the ANC Youth League in KwaZulu-Natal in extending an invite for him to attend Makakra's funeral. Malema says he does not need anyone's invitation to bury Makakra. The EFF leader also touched on the party's recent frosty relationship with the Democratic Alliance. Malema, who started his undergraduate degree in 2011, has been kept yet again. He said a lot of sacrifices were made to reach his goal.
At least 7 people have been killed on 4 different islands in the Caribbean by Hurricane Irma. The dual island nation of Antigua and Barbuda was especially hard hit. Described as one of the most powerful Atlantic storms on record, the dangerous Category 5 hurricane is passing the north coast of Puerto Rico. More than half of Puerto Rico's population of 3 million is without power. On its current course, Irma, with winds of 300 kilometers per hour, was on track to reach Florida in the United States over the weekend. President Trump has approved a pre-landfall emergency for Florida. And coming back home, more police have been deployed at the Umlazi township and nearby areas south of Durban ahead of the funeral of an alleged gang leader, Sandile Chilis Bengu. Sandile was shot dead during a shootout with the police last week. His memorial service, held earlier at a local hall, was marked by spinning of cars, loud dance music and gun wielding. Police spokesperson Tembe Gambele says there's been a message on social media that vehicles and police will be targeted at today's funeral as part of the gang's culture in honor of the death of one of their members.
A daily occurrence for the people of Umlazi since the death of a local car hijacker. This has prompted police to deploy more members. Today, this community was on lockdown as a memorial service for the gang leader was held. Many schools and businesses were closed. Streets were vacated as many motorists feared being hijacked. But some welcomed police visibility.
We're very happy to see police present here since there was a vehicle hijacker who was killed. We feel relieved to see them checking cars to see if they are not stolen. We want police visibility to continue even when there's no major incident that took place.
The gangs have vowed to continue firing shots randomly. They have also threatened an increase of hijackings ahead of the funeral.
We're also aware of that social media message, and then that's when we decided to deploy a number of police officials. And also what we want to say, we are going to deploy up until the burial of this gang leader who was killed last week on allegations of he was hijacking the vehicles, and also he was found with a car that was stolen in Chatsworth.
Police have discouraged communities from idolizing criminals and joining them when they fire shots and spin cars. Cassandra Zungu, SABC News, Durban.
Now, with that said, we'd like to carry that conversation a little further on gang violence in South Africa. Now, we've got a question for you that we want to find out from you. What are your views relating to young people joining gangs? Get involved with this discussion this morning. Tell us what your thoughts and views are on that. Now I've got Jamila van der Skeef, who's come in and says this is the major issue concerning youth. The need to get part-time jobs or become involved in recreational activities or maybe some sport. That's Jamila's comment on that. Keep them coming. We're really keen to find out what you've got to say. In fact, Elvis has got 2 interesting guests with him to carry the conversation a little further. Elvis?
Yeah, thank you, Kendall. There's a lot of traction on that question, and we're going to keep on reading those comments from our viewers here today. But the community in Port Elizabeth's so-called northern areas are living in constant fear because of rampant gang violence. Now, gang-related shootings have escalated over the past year. Police are investigating more than 150 cases of murder in the Galvindale-Bethelsdorp area. It was committed over the past year. Many of these murders were gang-related, and this number is still rising. But the community is starting to speak out and confront the alleged gang members.
Welcome to Helenvale, better known as Katanga. It received its nickname after people started comparing it to a province in the war-torn Democratic Republic of Congo. Akin to a war zone, around 20 gangs operate in Helenvale, Galvandale, Bethelsdorp and the surrounding areas. Children as young as 8 years old are roped in to join gangs. For this child, going to school used to involve daily extortion and fear.
And me and my cousin were standing at the tuck shop, and then this group of boys came running up to us and asking us for money to pay. And then they said we didn't have. And afterwards, they threatened us and said we're gonna beat us up.
This child has since left the school, but one of his friends was not as lucky.
He also had a bullet with his name on it. They said they're gonna kill him, and a few days later they shot and killed him also as well.
For many children in these areas, the threat of violence still plagues their lives. Local schools recently closed shop for 2 weeks because of a concern over their children's safety.
I'm standing by the gate by Bayview. Then the guys are passing with the guns. I don't know what is the problem, especially when it's break time. The poor children must run and they are devastated and all that kind of stuff. Many times I have to close the gates, but I don't know how did the gangsters find a way to climb over the gates.
In response to the fact that schools had to close, members of the community marched to the houses of alleged gang members, praying for them and pleading for an end to the violence.
We take the initiative to go and speak to those people that are shooting, because this is our children that are also shooting. We think if we as parents, as mummies, speak to these children, maybe they will listen, because we don't want the shooting just to cease now. We want ultimate peace in our suburb.
Port Elizabeth boasts South Africa's first operations command centre, designed to integrate units of the police into a single centralised building to tackle serious operations. One of its aims is to curb gangsterism in the northern areas through the provincial gang unit. The unit has made over 100 arrests for gang-related activities since its inception in February last year.
We have reduced shootings, especially those crossfire shootings where a lot of kids got killed. We'll never get rid of gangsterism, obviously. But we have to reduce and minimize the damage to the community and make the community further.
But now, many gang members are moving operations to nearby towns and cities, including Knysna, George, Jeffreys Bay, Grahamstown and East London. With poverty rampant in the Eastern Cape's gangland, gangsterism presents the youth with a lifestyle of relative wealth and power. Michael Dorfling, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
Now back home here in Gauteng, the ongoing gang violence in Westbury has left the embattled area paralyzed by fear, with pupils sometimes resorting to staying away from school. And community leaders are in hiding, and protests are planned against police corruption. Now besides this, there are still community members who are brave enough to stand up and fight for peace. Now for more on this, we are joined by community member Shahim Ismail, as well as David van Rijn here in studio. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning to you, Eben, and good morning to your viewers and listeners.
Now, Ismail, we've spoken to you quite a bit in the past. Now, as a community leader, from your perspective, what is going on in Westbury? Why are these gangs and the gang violence still continuing in the area?
You know, I think it's a lack of a commitment of every stakeholder within that community, and a lack of interest to find peace. And I cannot do it on my own, neither can the other few members that are community members that are with me in our strive for peace. For the past 18 months, we've been working on a peace committee and a peace initiative. We've done very well thus far. I also managed to get the South African Council on Churches on board, Dr. Frank Chikani and them. And that was to first unite the churches. And now our churches are united. We've got a peace body that we have established, where various pastors and ministers, fraternals and stakeholders are coming to be part of that structure. And it's unfortunate that the violence catches us every time unexpectedly, and it just flares up. But when it flares up in a very bad manner. That it's not one person, it's always 2, 3, 4, 5 to 6 people that get injured or lose their lives in a process. Like last week, it started again where 3 people were shot on Saturday broad daylight. 1 person lost his life. And then day before yesterday, another 3 people were shot where 1 person again lost his life. So in a space of 6 days, 2 people lost their lives and 6 people were shot. And there were shots They were shooting at various other areas within the community.
What is the motivation behind all of this?
That is very, very, it's difficult to answer that, Elvis, to be quite honest. You know, we can say it's drug related, we can say it's pure criminal activities, we can say it's gang related, but to prove it, it's very difficult. And that is where we are left every time, you know. We are on the verge to meet with certain people, their names have been coming up in these various shootings and violence, to start working through the peace process with them as well. And we're also targeting the victims and the families to help us to unite and to bring peace and to bring unity into that community. Unfortunately, we are left with a 10% police responsibility and 90% community responsibility.
And that is a problem.
So that's our biggest challenge. It's a challenge.
Now, Mr. Van Rijn, what is your involvement within the community, and what do you make of the gang violence still happening, especially in Westbury?
My involvement is coming from a church perspective, as one of part and parcel of the community leaders. And I feel that, and this is my personal opinion, that Jesus is the answer to the plight in our communities. I mean, myself, I've been in prison. I shot 6 people at one night. In one night, went to prison, was sentenced to 96 years of imprisonment. And amazingly, supernaturally, God just delivered me out of prison when my sentence was turned down to 16 years. Out of that, I did 4 years, 9 months. So yes, we've been working and toiling the soil in our communities, working with the guys in trying to see how we can bring about change in our communities. But it's not just that easy. I think if we as a community should really come together and stand together, and even the church collectively, and putting our differences aside and just standing as one voice, we can make a difference. It's possible, because I mean, I'm a product of change. I was part and parcel once of the ills in our communities. Know what it is to take a life. I know what it is to lay down my life for nothing.
If that is the case, why do you think is the motivation behind it? Now, Mr. Ismail indicated earlier that there's a number of factors, but from your perspective as a member involved previously, what do you think is the motivation? Is it only about drugs?
It goes far beyond. One can say it's generational, because you find that, I mean, myself personally, again, I'm like a 5th generation in my family with those gangsters. So yes, it can be generation. It's vast. It's not just, you cannot put it just in a nutshell. But I think once the mindset has been transformed and changed, yes, definitely, it can bring about change in our communities.
If you look at some of the tweets that we're receiving, this one from Matthews, for instance, says, most young people join the gangs because of peer pressure and to avoid being victimized if they don't belong to these gangs. Is that also a starting point, do you think?
It can be victimization, it can be peer pressure, and it can also be a sense of belonging. Emptiness, a void in your heart, standing on a street corner, and suddenly you find yourself being involved and being part and parcel of a thing that you have not asked for.
Absent fathers, is that another contributing factor?
Absent fathers, most definitely. I mean, you can go not only in Westbury, Nuclear, but in every community right across South Africa, we have absent fathers. I mean, I've been in prison. We have more of the fathers in prison than outside, rearing your children.
Now, the community, Mr. Ismail, met with the MEC of Safety and Security, Sizakele Molobani. How did that meeting go? And is there any progress in relation to finding the solutions or viable solutions for the community?
Yes, we had we call it an emergency meeting yesterday with the MEC's Chief of Staff, Komotso. Unfortunately, the MEC didn't attend the meeting, but I think the Chief of Staff is as good as the MEC. And we had that we formulated the relationship over the past 18 months with that office of the MEC, and I think the meeting went very well. We have received a massive commitment from the local station commander that was attending as well, and a commitment from the MEC's office, the Chief of Staff, that firstly, what always happens in these cases, once the violence flare up, we need to stabilize the community immediately. That means we need additional deployment to the community. Well, TRTs, flying squads, and whatever cops we can get in that area to stabilize and to take out the fear out of society. And that was committed to yesterday. We also recommitted commitment from the MEC's office was that we will now restructure as going forward with a new peace committee that will be leading the process of taking peace. So it must run together. The police and the community must run in one line. We cannot be running lopsided. In order for us to achieve our goals and objectives and to bring peace and to start living a normal life within our communities, which we are not currently living, is that we all need to move together as one. And the blame should be taken out. Marches, protests, stayaways, never, it will never work. And, you know, it's just that the MEC's office has committed themselves to the process continuously to say that they are there and that they've got an open door for us. And we use that open door, and we used it yesterday very well.
David, are you assisting with the consultations with the gang members and with the community in order to bring a stability? And is the process, as outlined by Shahim, the way to go in relation to bring that stability and peace that we're looking for?
Yes, I'm also on board with Shahim and them and the team. And this morning he just said to me that he wants me to get more involved. So yes, we've been assisting and consulting with the guys on the ground, especially. And especially one of the friends of mine, personal friend, that was shot over the weekend. I mean, it's a guy that I used to speak to every day and pleading, please, refrain from being on this corner. But you know, choice is something I cannot enforce. It's something that he really needs, and that individual. So yes, we are part and parcel of the change.
Part and parcel of the change, that means not only rehabilitated persons like yourself, but also the community as a whole.
Collective.
Is community, collective involvement perhaps the answer also in making sure that people understand the problem? Because if you're a gangster, you live in a family, in a house, where you have either a mother, a father, or a neighbor that know about your criminality.
Exactly.
And we need to expose it.
On that one, Elvis, I can recall the time when I came in here, you asked a question once to me that, what do we do at the time when there's no violence in a community? What do the community do to see that we put some things into place before violence comes and not act on crisis? And I answered to you and I said, you know, we are currently busy, but it's a massive task. Because we must remember we're sitting with 45,000 residents within that community with different ideas, different minds. And we've got this massive violence every time on our hands. And yes, we have never sat still, we never sat back and stood still and folded our arms. Continuously, we are sacrificing our lives, we are sacrificing our families. We attend meetings 24/7 just to bring some sense of hope and continuous hope and stability to the area. So while the peace initiative and the peace structures that we've come up with, the community should just get involved as possible, and we need to be constructive in order to make sure that the community starts functioning properly again.
Now, a little bit later in the program, a short while, we'll be speaking to members of Black, that's the Bishop Lavis Action Group. Now, they've done something completely different. It's some of the issues. Those are your thoughts. Please keep them coming. But let's now take a look at what people are talking about on Twitter. And we start off with the President, Jacob Zuma. He's the most spoken about man this week with 1.1 million tweets. This after the EFF and the DA had court bids earlier this week to impeach the president or to have an early election. Hashtag Zuma Concourt. Then we go on to the hashtag Bhisho massacre. It will be commemorated today as those lives lost will be remembered. The tragic day took place on the 7th of September 1992. Where about 80,000 protesters gathered outside Bhisho supporting the opposition to Opakhozo's rule at that point in time. That meeting was led by senior ANC leaders, including South African Communist Party Secretary General Chris Hani, Cyril Ramaphosa, Steve Tshwete, and Ronnie Kasrils. And some good, before we get to the good news for the man in red, I see a picture there of Bafana, and I don't know why. But for the man in red, if we can get that picture up, that was Julius Malema, the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF. He has graduated from UNISA with a BA in philosophy. Hashtag Malema. Congratulations, Chief Commander, the Commander-in-Chief, rather, of the EFF. But then, of course, let's go back to that Bafana picture that you've seen earlier. Bafana is having a tough time. They have to replay their match against Senegal after FIFA found the coach, well, not the coach, rather the referee, guilty of match fixing. And was it the coach? Was it the referee? Well, you got to enlighten me on that one, but Kendall will speak to you about that a little bit later. Then the tropical Caribbean islands have been severely affected by Hurricane Irma. Now, this is a Category 5 hurricane, which is deadly. There's some flooding and houses have been destroyed. At least 7 people have died thus far. And devastating pictures that you can see on your screen right now. Look at that devastation. Some are suggesting that this area is inhabitable. And remember that those islands really are focusing on tourism as a means of income, and what happened here is absolutely devastating. And then, marriage is all the talk in Australia as the nation voted for or against gay marriage and equality. Now, the postal vote cost $122 million. That result are being tallied and will be available next month, and we'll keep you updated on that. Hashtag marriage equality, hashtag LGBTIQ. Our picture of the day comes from Khosi Yaleboa and is captioned, "Let's congratulate Kevin Anderson for being the first South African tennis player to reach the semis in a major tournament in 14 years. Yes, the first major South African in 14 years. I can remember still, I mean, probably going much way back than that was Johan Kriek. And who was the other one? There was another one, but Kendall will also tell us more about that. The comment of the day comes, in fact, that was Wayne Ferreira, if I can recall correctly. The comment of the day comes from Leandri J. van Feren, who says, "Congrats, Julius Malema, EFF leader, graduates rather with a BA Honours in Philosophy. Great example to the youth." Now that is the youth that we're looking for. Hashtag Malema graduation, hashtag UNISA, and not gangs or youth joining gangs. That's the opposite, isn't it? Let's now take a look what's happening in our court scene, starting here in Johannesburg. The Feast Must Fall student activist Mcebo Dlamini is due back in the Johannesburg Magistrates Court. Now he's facing charges of violating a court order, public violence, assault, theft and damage to property. That all relates to last year's Feast Must Fall protest at Wits University. The case was postponed last month after Dlamini's legal representative fell ill. Dlamini was arrested in October last year and later released on bail of 2,000 rand. During that month, students protested across South Africa for free tertiary education. Keep you updated on some of these developments in court. Now, let's throw forward. Tomorrow, we'll revisit the issue of private sector corruption, collusion, and monopoly. Well, the Competition Commission, of course, are investigating a number of firms in this country, and that relates to collusion. Impacts on you and me, impacts on your price of bread, your price of milk, and the things, those basic things that we need to make a living of. But we'll take a break. We'll be right back. We continue our discussion looking at the issue of gang violence and youth joining gangs.
What guides us? What leads us forward? Is it leaders on a soapbox, spouting rhetoric for the crowd? Is it the actions of our people? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people. And your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
Now, we were in Port Elizabeth earlier. We came back to Johannesburg. Let's now go to Cape Town. Years of gang violence there has caused havoc in Cape Town, especially on the Cape Flats. Over the years, many victims, including children, have been killed in gang wars. There's infighting in the 28 gang that has resulted in several hits and attempted hits, and rival gangs fighting each other, mainly over the drug trade. Elsies River, Bishop Lavis are just a few kilometers from the city centre, and they are amongst the most volatile areas in terms of gang violence. For more on this, we are joined in our Cape Town studios by Victor Altenstadt as well as Andre Kana. They are from the Bishop Lavis Action Community, or BLAC. A very good morning to you, gentlemen, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. And good morning to the viewers.
First and foremostly, to both of you, Victor and Andre, why is gang violence still so rife in Cape Town, especially on the Cape Flats?
Firstly, it's because that there's a lack of opportunity. Our children are faced with drug abuse, and there is no real opportunities for them to go in extracurricular activities. And the gangs are the next option. There's money, there's power, there's family, and that is what most of our youngsters are looking for.
And from your side, Andre?
Victor?
Victor, I beg your pardon.
No,
this
is Victor. Gang violence is endemic to the system. We have young people who are looking at gangsters as role models. These guys provide them with money. These guys are the only people who work within the communities, who can drive cars, those type of things. So to a great extent, it has got to do with role modeling. And because the youth also do not have, as Andrea said, do not have those opportunities. And there are also not those organizations which enable these opportunities to take place for our young people. So say, for instance, if we're looking at the budget that, for instance, our local councillor has, you know, to what extent are we looking proactively at addressing this whole thing of gangsterism? Unlike those groups within PE and within Joburg, who has a reactionary approach towards gangsterism, because we're talking about it's flaring up again, that will normally happen. We are an organization, the Bishop Lavis Action Community. We are but 1 month old. It took us not even 2 weeks, and without an office, to organize a wreath laying and a sing-along within the community. We were very well received within that community. Within our community, within Bishop Lavis, we were paralyzed. People didn't know what to do. You know, when the Bishop Lavis Action Community launched this wreath laying and sing-along as a means to address the trauma within the community, it was as if our community just said that this was something that we have been waiting for all along.
Now,
people spontaneously joined in. We had a march within Bishop Lavis, something which we didn't even have a permit for. But that was the commitment from the community within itself to take a stand against these killings. Because from July up until early August, and now up until about 2 weeks back, we have had, within the space of a month, we had about 16 people killed within Bishop Lavis.
Andre? Andre, let me just check with you. So the Reclaim Bishop Lavis is actually the project that's driving the community in order to bring an end to violence. Is that correct? And how are you doing it?
That is correct, but it is purely on the community side. It is the community took ownership of the project. We as BLAC facilitated the program. It's more for just to start the healing process. We had so many people that were killed, so many mothers lost a son, and we just thought that it is by time now that we take our community back.
And just to see the emotion on the day when we laid the wreaths and planted the crosses at the various sites where the killings happened. And the community's response was overwhelming. It was for the first time they could see that they are not alone. And we made the statement that day that enough is enough, that we are here to take our community back. And it's not just for the now, it is for our future as well. Because our children are so unsensitized with regards to gun violence that they don't run away from the gunshots anymore. They run towards it, and that is alarming. If 6, 7-year-olds can run towards the gun to go see who was shot now. So yes, it's part of the healing process. It's not done yet. We have various other projects as well. We're setting up a action law as an advice office. We are having Women in Action. We're going to set up some street committees where the mothers, those that are at home, can join the street committee, and they will not be part of our meetings and all of that, but they will be the link between black and the community. We will also have projects like Men in Action. There's so many households without a father, and there are so many good fathers within Bishop Lavis, and that is just for the men to say, it's now time to take action again. We are launching our Youth in Action program within 2 weeks, which will be a challenge day. It's basically just to get the trust of the youth back again, to bring them in a safe environment, not to be judged.
Victor? Yeah, Andre,
Yes,
thank you.
Albert?
Thank you. Victor, from your perspective, now, I heard about, because I was going to ask about the youngsters and the children being involved in gangs. So that youth involvement program that you also have, will that assist the community and the children from not joining these gangs?
You see, that is but one aspect of what we do within the Bishop Lavis Action community, because we are driven by a slogan which says, active community participation for total liberation. What we basically mean by that is that we want to advance activism within our community. Every community member and activist is another slogan that we advance. And we do not advance these slogans for the sake of sounding fancy. You know, what we say here is that gangsterism is a political problem. And within the Western Cape, it is a political football between your provincial DA and your national ANC. Hence, we have had meetings with the provincial police commissioner, who's talking about a certain thing, and then with the deputy minister of police within the national government, who's also talking something different. But all of these, like for instance, these solutions that they offer, they want us to go back to the Bambananis. We've had that. What we need is revolutionary projects that the community, that our community can buy into, to change their lives. Because it is, we cannot wait for a government to do it.
Yes.
If we are not going to mobilize our people, let our people look at ourselves to find those solutions, we will be waiting until forever for government.
Yes.
We are not saying that we do not want to work with government. Of course we want to work with government. And our mission statement states that we want to have strategic partnerships with government and other stakeholders.
Yes.
But to ensure that we get an equitable cut from the budget. Like for instance, within Rondebosch, they had a pilot project within Rondebosch with CCTV cameras. All of the houses in Rondebosch have CCTV in there.
Yes, gentlemen.
in their residences.
Unfortunately, Victor, that's where we got to leave it. Thank you so much for your participation and all the best of luck there. That was Victor Altenstadt as well as Andre Kana from the Bishop Lavis Action Community in our Cape Town studios. Now, some children and adolescents are motivated to join a gang for a sense of connection or to define a new sense of who they are. Others are motivated by peer pressure, a need to protect themselves and their family because a family member is perhaps also in a gang, or to make matters worse, they join the gang to make money. One of the worst effects of gang membership is the exposure to violence, especially for children. Now, to talk to us about gang violence and how it affects children, we are joined by Dr. Shahida Omar. She's the CEO from the Teddy Bear Clinic. Doctor, very good morning to you.
Good morning to everybody.
First and foremostly, how does gang culture and gang violence affect children?
Well, I think firstly, you've highlighted very important things, that a lot of these children are gravitating towards gang because to achieve a false sense of security, where they would feel safe, because if they do not belong to a gang, they are more likely to be subjected to abuse by their peers or punitive measures, so they're going to be violated. And this is one of the reasons that children gravitate towards gangs. But I think one needs to also appreciate that they are surrounded by a culture of violence, neighborhood of violence, and often that is one of the risk factors that contribute towards children gravitating towards gangs. And of course, implications of economic factors. Coming from an impoverished context, children aspire towards having the acquisition of consumables, you know, your cell phones, your cash, your fancy cars, the clothes that go with it. And the gangs actually provide this opportunity that they do not have access to. So if they do not belong to a gang, they are going to live in constant fear and are more likely to be violated.
Children that grow up without fathers, are they more likely to join these type of gangs?
Indeed, I think one needs to understand that the lack of adequate paternal presence, because fathers could be physically present in the life of a child, but not emotionally available or accessible to the child. So it is, we speak about that physical and emotional presence where the child has access to the paternal figure, but also that it is an adequate male role model, you know, that figure where they can identify with somebody with positive attributes that would have a positive impact on their life.
Are children that are exposed to gangsterism, are they more likely or at greater risk to perhaps become perpetrators of violence in future?
Well, indeed, because this is the kind of life they are exposed to. It's socialized, it's normalized, that this is how it should be, because they do not know any differently. And the trajectory is certainly mapped out for them, where they continue perpetuating, because often violence is associated with power. You know, there's this misnomer that if you join a gang and if you continue with what the gang expects of you, you are going to be recognized as a powerful figure. And often this is very characteristic in children who have low self-esteem and, you know, low self-worth and do not see themselves belonging anywhere. The connectedness that you mentioned earlier, it's one of the reasons that gives impetus and gravitates young boys to join gangs.
How does this affect them mentally, and how do they then perform at school in return?
Well, certainly violence becomes the order of the day. This misused power becomes their way of life, and a lot of these children drop out of school, or their performance becomes very low or poor. It's not satisfactory, and they start, what we see typically in many schools at school level is that these members of the gang would start bullying and using their force and might around them. They would not only violate their peers, but even their educators or adult figures, and even people in the community, because it's about recognition, acknowledgement, and wanting to be seen as somebody powerful.
gang violence, in a sense, and we've seen this happening in a number of townships, how does it contribute to adolescents also joining these gangs?
Well, I think what I want to say that, yes, we are seeing a lot of adolescents and young adults, but the concern is that we are beginning to see many younger children, you know, where previously gang violence was more prevalent in your high school, the junior high and senior high. We are beginning to see that at primary school level. And what we see at primary school level and, of course, high school is the substance abuse. That's one of the risk factors of joining gangs. We're also seeing sexually age-inappropriate behavior where the members join and go along to get along because they're seeking approval, affection. It's a maladaptive way of being wanted and needed. And this is the kind of violence where you're seeing all forms of self-destructive, self-defeating behavioral patterns.
How do we as a society and a community, especially and at schools, how do we deal with this issue with children joining these gangs and keep them away from this violence?
So we need to also look at that this is a systemic problem and requires systemic intervention. Yes, parents certainly do have a role, but parents are not always enabled and equipped. So we need to look at positive parenting programs where parents know how to engage with children, but also finding opportunities for recreation, because lack of recreational facilities in many communities, enables children or precipitates children towards gang activity. So we need to provide sporting activities to create these role models that children identify with, your celebrities, your icons, your sports heroes, where they could then act as adequate male role models to empower children in engaging in more constructive behaviors. But even at school level, where the life skills program needs to look at positive choices, enabling children to make informed decisions. So implementing pro-social skills at school level. And even at community level, your faith-based organizations, your community-based organizations, everybody needs to come to the party.
As the Teddy Bear Clinic doctor, how do you assist children in their communities?
Well, we have our SAFE program, which is a school outreach program, where we workshop with learners from as young as 2.5 and older, talking to them about acceptable and unacceptable behaviors, safe and unsafe touches, but making them aware of dangers that are lurking out there and that actions certainly do have consequences.
Doctor, I thank you so much for your time and joining us here in studio.
Thank you very much.
Now that was Dr. Shahida Omar. She is the CEO of the Teddy Bear Clinic, talking to us about children and gang violence. Yes, now that's serious stuff, but right now, of course, sports stuff, much more serious, because Bafana, Kendall, seems like to be either a sinking ship or a hurricane.
You know what, there's lots that's been spoken about Bafana. We thought we'd said it all, and then of late FIFA comes back with some heavy news about how they need to replay the match they thought they'd won against Senegal. But you know, bigger than that, Elvis, there's a funeral that's on the go. There's a ceremony that's on the go right now about a journalist who I'd really like to talk about. In fact, this man would have had a lot to say about what's been happening with Bafana of late. Former SABC Sport and Sunday Times journalist Mgebisa passed away last week at the Charlotte Maxeke Johannesburg Hospital following kidney failure. Now, with him being laid to rest today, I saved a conversation I had earlier this week with a close friend of his, another renowned sports journalist, Vata Ngobeni, about the man who he called a friend.
We had gone to school together. In the early 90s, we attended Queen's College Boys High School down in the Eastern Cape in Queenstown. And that's where I got to really get to know Mzi, the straight talker, as you said, the man who shoots from the hip. And he was 2 years ahead of me. And I mean, he had a fantastic love for football, even then at school. And he dared to try and introduce football in a school that is over 150 years old with all the traditions. We tried. He tried. We had a football team for a few months.
We're talking about Queen's College.
About Queen's College, the traditional rugby cricket school steeped in the history of old colonial schools. So Mzi already from then, from a very young age, was a trailblazer. And already by then he had sort of tried to get his way into the football world in journalism. And he, obviously after school, he went to varsity, and then from there he joined Times Media, joined independent newspapers for the Star, and then ended up at SABC Sport, where he finished off as managing editor, and in his latter years was script writing and an analyst on SABC Sport.
Talking of his latter years, we know that in the public has come out that he died of kidney failure. Was he sickly? Mzi, from time to time, we call him the big man, figuratively and literally. He was a big man in sport. So from time to time, he'd be in hospital. I think, but the last sort of 2 months have been extremely difficult for him because some of the failures of his health had been brought on, by a lot of stress, but the fact that he had been unemployed since the beginning of the year, and so that contributed, I think, to Mzi's bad health, and ultimately succumbed, as you said, to kidney failure, which is very, very sad. I believe that his memorial service was quite an interesting affair, with lots of well wishes, lots of people that are close to him, feeling that he had been hard done by. Yes, it was first of all very, very emotional. His colleagues, past and present, had very good things to say about Mzi, but at the same time, in the typical Mzimasi style, people really spoke truth to power, and I think that's what Mzi ultimately, lived and died for, and was persecuted for, was speaking truth to power. Yes. So I think it is poignant that, as journalists, we learn something from Mzimasi, and his legacy must be that journalists must be able to do the job and do without fear or favor, and knowing that there will be no retribution for putting the facts on the table and speaking truth to power, regardless of whether it's your employer or people out there. Well put. For those that are interested, his funeral, can you give us these details? Yeah, the funeral will be on Thursday in Irene at 3C Church. And I believe that he'll be buried in Midrand. So I think people must have a look out on social media, details of that. I think service starts at 9 a.m. on Thursday morning. So I think the sporting fraternity will be out there en masse.
Hello and a warm welcome to PM News, and we're broadcasting live from Johannesburg.
4 decades later, the family is still seeking closure.
We need the truth, and the truth must be told.
Children often go undiagnosed because they are hidden away. About 1 million people in South Africa live with autism.
Creative recycling at play.
Mosaic has been around forever. I just had to find a new, fresh way to put, and a new spin to put on it. So I decided, why not recycled cans?
Stay tuned to PM News for all your news updates every Saturday and Sunday from 1500 hours.
Rights and recourse tackles constitutional issues.
When South Africa became a constitutional democracy, we had a fairly sound legal system in place requiring the Constitution to guide the direction in which it must go and the way in which it must be refashioned.
The Justice Ministry, the custodian of human rights.
We actually have a plan to come up with a comprehensive review of our human rights instrument.
Advocates dealing with evidence.
Sometimes you have to use a crook to catch a crook. So we expected that the credibility would really be taken to task. You try and consult your witnesses and prepare them as best as you can.
Hashtag Rights with Dumila Matez on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
A very good morning to you. It is now 10 o'clock. You're watching Newsroom. My name is Kendall Makhamate as I bring you Newsroom on this beautiful spring day right here in Johannesburg. We've had some very interesting discussions being had on the show today, as well as some interesting happenings going on around Gauteng. Now, today our focus is on some children and adolescents who are motivated to join gangs due to the high rates of absent fathers to get a sense of belonging, connection, as well as protection. And that's why today we're asking you, what are your views relating to young people joining gangs? We're very interested to see what your comments on this matter are. IC Tole says, if you oppress any group in any form except a rebellion.
This one from Dipanso says, not surprised. We need a law that would bind men to take responsibility like in Germany or face the law.
Absolutely. We've been actually trying to get to the heart of the matter and gripping with all the things that are really important to you as well as us. And we've also got a poll today, Elvis.
Very good poll looking at the NPA. Of course, Sean Abrams, the head of the NPA, they want more money.
Absolutely. They want more money. They want an additional 100 million rand from the government. We want to find out what your thoughts on that are. I mean, look at everything that you think about the NPA, what they have been doing and what they do. What do you think? Should they get an additional 100 million rand?
282 votes in Kendall. 77% are saying no. 23% are saying yes.
Flat no. The overwhelming majority say no way. 100 million rand in addition to whatever they're getting from Parliament. No, they shouldn't be getting. Destiny Lefelo comes in with the NPA. They are corrupt. All the money they put in the pocket, and they choose people who to prosecute. No, no, no.
There's one coming from Dipanso says, for what? That's a dead institution, and they never do their job in any case. Well, those are some of your comments. You can keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But we also have a sports question this morning, Kendall. We talked about a sinking ship a little earlier. Is it truly that for Bafana Bafana?
Well, you know what? The 4 points that they thought they had is now just one. You know, that match against Senegal, they thought they'd won in November.
Yes.
They didn't win it. They need to replay it.
So that's why the question then, of course, as FIFA's decision just sunk Bafana's chances of making it to Russia 2018.
Witness Matore says Bafana Bafana must be changed from keeper to strikers. The entire team.
Well, probably Stewart must take a back seat. But Wandi says, are they gonna reverse all the games that the referees messed up? Good question there.
Pertinent question.
Well, you can keep them coming, but right now let's take a look at what's happening in the news headlines. The National Prosecuting Authority wants an additional 100 million rand in order to continue its operations. EFF leader Julius Malema says that he doesn't need anybody's permission to attend the funeral service of the former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Magaka. And ferocious winds from Hurricane Irma have flattened the Dutch Caribbean island of St. Martin's, killing at least 6 people and destroying an airport. Those are your headlines. Let's find out from Kendall what's happening in the news as well as in your sports news.
Elvis, thank you very much. Quite a heavy day of news we've got today, as well as in the sports. But before I bring you what's happening in our top stories, this is what we've got for you in the sports today. FIFA orders the World Cup qualifier between South Africa and Senegal, played in November last year, to be replayed after it had banned the referee for match fixing.
More of a hometown decision. Lumpty Dumpty.
I don't think it's for lack of opportunities. I don't think it's for lack of intensity. I don't think it's for lack of effort. The attitudes have been good, so I can't really fault it. Sometimes in football, it doesn't always go like that for you.
Gavin Hunt is hoping for a bit of luck when he faces his protege Benny McCarthy in the second leg MTN8 semi-final tie.
Del Potro's back in the US Open semi-finals.
Argentine Juan Martín Del Potro denies the tennis world the match it had been anticipating as he saves 2 set points against Roger Federer to set up a semi-final against another crowd favorite, Rafael Nadal.
Well, I played him in 2009 too, and, as the same Rogers, and hopefully I can repeat the result.
Well, there you have it. Very interesting sporting day we'll be bringing to you a little later on. But first up, our top stories right here on Newsroom. Now, National Director of Public Prosecutions, Sean Abraham, says the National Prosecuting Authority wants an additional 100 million rand in order to continue its operations. Abrahams also addressed several other issues with the Justice Portfolio Committee, including state capture investigations and Grace Mugabe.
The NPA is falling short of meeting its performance targets. Abrahams blames this on the critical shortage of investigative and prosecutorial capacity within the NPA. It's already lost 55 staffers since April. An additional 157 officials left the prosecutorial authority during the 2016-2017 financial year.
We're sitting in a situation where there are 45 critical posts that we have to fill now as a matter of urgency. As a second phase to that, there's another 112 posts that we've got to have those posts advertised within the next few weeks.
Abrahams also briefed MPs on the state of the investigations into state capture.
The first leg is, of course, what we refer to as the mentor investigation. The second leg is the Jonas investigation. The third leg is the Government Communications Information System and the New Age investigation. The fourth leg relates to the allegations of Eskom and Tegeta. The fifth leg relates to the allegations in respect of Transnet and Trillion. The sixth leg relates to the allegations in respect of the NAL and the VR laser investigation.
The NPA boss also says he believes that Zimbabwean First Lady Grace Mugabe should have been charged for the alleged assault of a young woman at a Sandton hotel last month. Lukhanya Khalada, SABC News, Parliament.
Now, further scrutiny of the Gupta leaks has implicated suspended Eskom CFO Anuj Singh in fresh Gupta kickback claims. The media investigative units, Amapungani and Scopi, says that the evidence points to a criminal conspiracy to defraud South Africans of billions of rand. Singh is a former CFO of Transnet and is currently...
News that we have substantial evidence of him taking benefit from the Guptas, and quite a lot of it. And that is at the same time that he is overseeing the money at Transnet and then later at Eskom. And we see billions of contracts go out at Transnet, for which we've identified large numbers of kickbacks, which did flow to the Guptas. And then the pattern continued when he moved over to Eskom. And all along he was taking benefits from the Guptas, so that's starting to look a lot like bribery.
The National Prosecuting Authority, Sean Abrahams, was speaking today, saying when it comes to the Gupta leaks, just because he's silent, it doesn't mean that nothing's happening. Does that inspire confidence? Everybody's waiting to see what will the repercussions be.
I'm hugely inspired to hear that. But yeah, let's see what the repercussions would be. I think somebody should have probably picked up Anuj Singh by now to ask him some very, very serious questions, just on the basis of evidence that's already out there.
The evidence that's out there does link him to Dubai, to accepting hotel stays, things like that. He was involved in this huge contract that you mentioned at Transnet. The kickbacks there, nearly 6 billion rand, so not small amounts. Remind us of the proof that he was lining the pockets of the Guptas.
Look, it looks like it looks systematic when you analyze what happened at Transnet from 2011 through to 2015, when Anuj Singh and Brian Molefe left to go to Eskom. Transnet launched a 300 billion rand capital investment plan. They're going to buy locomotives, cranes, and there are all sorts of services that need to go with those. They need IT, they need telecoms, they need financial advisory services, and so on. And so there was a lot of money to be spent, and And at every place where we can get a glimpse into the details, we find fingerprints of the Guptas and their employees and their people and their friends being involved. And now what we see in the Gupta leaks, we found a number of actual kickback contracts from contractors with Transnet, so they supplied services or goods to Transnet, and they agreed on the back of those contracts to pay money offshore to Dubai or to Hong Kong. And those companies receiving that money were channeling that money into Gupta accounts in Dubai. And we see that in the Gupta leaks, in their internal accounting records, we see it in their emails, we see it in their SWIFT transfers, and we see billions and billions flowing.
And there was a shell company apparently opened by the Guptas for Anuj Singh himself. Can we see what's going in and out of that?
No, we can't, and that's exactly the point. It's in the Emirate Ras Al Khaimah, and it's very well known for its financial secrecy. It's also a tax haven. There's 0% tax there. But they are very, very serious there about their banking secrecy. So money that's going in and out of accounts in that emirate is not going to be easily seen by any law enforcement authority anywhere in the world. And that's specifically what that country does, what that financial jurisdiction does. So that I think is incredibly worrying that the Guptas gave him a company like that. And they happened to pick up that company 3 days after the locomotive contractor got its Transnet contract. And as soon as the money started rolling into the Gupta's accounts in Dubai, we see them giving that company to Anuj Singh. Circumstantially, that looks extremely bad.
In the meantime, Economic Freedom Fighters Commander-in-Chief Julius Malema says he will attend the funeral of former ANC Youth League Secretary-General Sindiso Magaqa. However, a thorough security assessment will need to be done. Malema was speaking after he'd graduated with a BA Honours in Philosophy at UNISA in Pretoria.
Still reeling from the pain of Magaqa's passing away, Malema says he would like to pay his respects and find peace following the trauma he suffered at the news of his death. But he has raised security concerns about attending Magaqa's funeral.
I will attend his funeral if conditions allow, because in that funeral, and what is more painful about politics is that the people who kill you are the ones who are going to preside over your funeral and use your funeral to popularize themselves. So we ought to be careful about that. Only when conditions allow, we'll attend Magaqa's funeral.
Malema says Magaqa was killed for standing against corruption. He expressed his frustration at what he called a stunt by the ANC Youth League in KwaZulu-Natal in extending an invite for him to attend Magaqa's funeral. Malema says he does not need anyone's invitation to bury Magaqa. The EFF leader also touched on the party's recent frosty relationship with the Democratic Alliance. Malema, who started his undergraduate degree in 2011, has been kept yet again. He said a lot of sacrifices were made to reach his goal.
Mineral Resources Minister Msebenzi Zwane says amendments to the country's mining law are expected to be passed by December and provide greater investor certainty. Zwane was speaking at the Africa Down Under conference in Perth, Australia. Now, changes to the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act, MPRDA, were initially passed by Parliament in 2015, but were then sent back by President Jacob Zuma over concerns over their constitutionality. Concerns have been raised that as with the mining charter, the Chamber of Mines might challenge amendments to the MPRDA. The Chamber represents about 95% of the country's mining sector. And the Labour Court in Johannesburg will hand down judgment tomorrow on who should pay the legal costs incurred over the dismissal of the SABC 8. This followed the unlawful dismissal of the journalists from the public broadcaster last year. Yesterday, the Labour Court heard lawyers for unions, Solidarity and Bemau argue that former SABC COO Hlaudi Motsoeneng and former news executive Simon Tebele should be held liable for the costs. This was opposed by lawyers for Motsoeneng and Tebele, who want the SABC to pay the costs of last year's litigation. 7 of the 8 dismissed journalists were reinstated after obtaining a court order. City Power expects power to be restored to the Johannesburg CBD soon. The Johannesburg Power Utility says its technicians worked throughout the night to repair the damage to its burnt power cables. On Sunday, thieves gained access to the underground tunnels and cut out 15 million rands worth of copper cables, which was later recovered. 3 people were arrested, including one owner who tried to bribe Metro Police officers with 10,000 rands in cash. Many businesses in the CBD have been affected.
Cable theft syndicates that operate in Johannesburg have been having it easy, damaging infrastructure and rendering the city dysfunctional for more than 3 days. City Power says the damage to the cables resulted from a fire set out during an attempted cable theft on Sunday morning. This affected multiple feeders and load centers at various substations in the central business district.
It is a very sophisticated syndicate. The way they operate, it clearly shows that they know what they are doing. Because they opened the manholes in the inner city and went underground through the tunnels which are running on the streets of the CBD. It says a lot that they are specialized in this. They've been doing it for years.
Police nabbed 4 suspects. Copper with an estimated value of 15 million rand was discovered at the scene. It has been reported that the suspects sold it for only 400,000 rand in the black market. The SAPS was then led to a smelting area nearby. This massive smelter houses tons of raw scrap metal. It's difficult to differentiate legitimate copper from the stolen metal, as it is all mixed up.
The problem of cable theft is a major one in the city of Johannesburg, especially in light of the significant infrastructure challenges we face in the city. The city has an infrastructure backlog of well over 170 billion rand. That means every ounce and centimeter of infrastructure stolen from the residents of Johannesburg has massive impacts. The recent theft of copper cables from the underground streets of Joburg had a massive impact on a significant part of the inner city, plunging most of it into darkness. So that's something that we need to combat, and we need to make sure that there's no space for these criminal syndicates who would steal from the city, from the residents of Johannesburg, to function whatsoever.
Although power has now been restored in most areas, technicians have been working around the clock to carry out technical assessment on the extent of the damage to the underground cables. Operations at this scrapyard have been suspended immediately, and the police have sealed these premises as a crime scene. More arrests are expected to be made. Colin Limani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, more police have been deployed at Umlazi Township and nearby areas south of Durban ahead of the funeral of an alleged gang leader, Sandile Chilis Bengu. Sandile was shot dead during a shootout with the police last week. His memorial service, held earlier at a local hall, was marked by spinning cars, loud dance music and gun wielding. Police spokesperson Mgebisa says there's been a message on social media that vehicles and police will be targeted at today's funeral as part of the gang's culture in honor of the death of one of their members.
A daily occurrence for the people of Umlazi since the death of a local car hijacker. This has prompted police to deploy more members. Today, this community was on lockdown as a memorial service for the gang leader was held. Many schools and businesses were closed. Streets were vacated as many motorists feared being hijacked. But some welcomed police visibility.
We're very happy to see police present here since there was a vehicle hijacker who was killed. We feel relieved to see them checking cars to see if they are not stolen. We want police visibility to continue even when there's no major incident that took place.
The gangs have vowed to continue firing shots randomly. They have also threatened an increase of hijackings ahead of the funeral.
We're also aware of that social media message, and then that's when we decided to deploy a number of police officials. And also what we want to say, we are going to deploy up until the burial of this gang leader who was killed last week on allegations of he was hijacking the vehicles, and also he was found with a car that was stolen in Chatsworth.
Police have discouraged communities from idolizing criminals and joining them when they fire shots and spin cars. Cassandra Zungu, SABC News, Durban.
Now, the usage of community libraries by residents in the Northwest Province is extremely poor. This emerged at the launch of the National Book Week by the Provincial Department of Culture, Arts and Traditional Affairs in partnership with the South African Book Development Council in Itsoseng, near Mahikeng. Only 14% of the South African population are active book readers.
But I thought a king can do whatever he wants, said Simba.
A day of reading, poetry and fun activities. Children of all ages taught about the importance of reading. One of government's main challenges is keeping the youth interested in books.
We need to encourage the youth to read books that are on the electronic versions. And I mean, the importance of it is that while at least they're reading it, they can share information. They can share information even online.
Under the theme, Our Stories, the partnership encourages writers to offer relatable content.
We are saying, let's write about our own stories, let's read our stories, and let's help our children to read. Let's read to our children.
According to the South African Book Development Council, only 5% of parents read to their children, while 58% of the nation's households don't own books. Hence, a day like this to encourage the culture of reading in a small dorpi like Itsoseng. Government says the stereotype that libraries are only for intellectuals must be changed.
We would still want to see an increased number of usage of community libraries. We want to see more reading. We want to have a complaint coming from the library that all Setswana books that are on the shelves has been read and communities want to read more.
The young ones agree that reading is the future.
I enjoy reading because it teaches me the word that I didn't know, and it keeps me from the street, and it can make me my future bride.
National Book Week ends on Sunday. Olebogeng Khosilinswe, SABC News, Itsoseng, near Mahikeng.
Now, the ANC has raised concern about recent statements by Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, in which he criticized the late struggle icon, former President Nelson Mandela. But there's no word from Zimbabwe on the matter.
How come the whites have been left with so much power? ANC. You can say it was because of your friend Mandela.
It is this statement that has irked South Africa's ruling party.
At some point in time, former President Nelson Mandela had to respond to similar views.
A commentator from the BBC, many of you would have seen it, about 2 or 3 years ago, said Mandela is a useless chap. He has done nothing either for his country or for humanity. I then replied that I welcome such statement because they destroy this myth that somebody is an angel and cannot be criticized. I never wanted to be regarded as an angel. I'm an ordinary human being with weaknesses, some of them fundamental, and I've made many mistakes in my life. I am not a saint.
Now, the ANC has joined the fray in defense of its former president.
I phoned the Secretary General of ZANU-PF and I said to him, you see, Dr. Chombo, your president is all over Matiba, but the reality of the matter is that you have destroyed the economy in your country. We continue to create black millionaires in this country, including Zimbabwean millionaires. So refrain your president from making statements that are unresearched.
Today, ZANU-PF held its Politburo meeting, but no word from the party leadership. Sophie Mkweni, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Chief Justice Mogoeng has expressed concern over recent comments by Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta regarding the judiciary. Last week, Kenya's Supreme Court cancelled the election results, citing irregularities in the voting system. Kenyatta, who initially accepted the ruling, reportedly called the judges crooks. Mokgoeng says the remarks are most unfortunate, ill-advised and disturbing. Speaking as the president of the Conference of Constitutional Jurisdictions of Africa, he says the concern is that Kenyatta's comments could be interpreted as being insightful. Mokgoeng says the utterances inadvertently protect judges as enemies of the will of the people who must be fixed. The Chief Justice extends his support to his Kenyan counterpart on the judiciary for their commitment to their oaths of office. In the meantime, the United Nations Secretary General has meanwhile praised the Kenyan Supreme Court's decision to overturn the election result as a demonstration of the country's democracy. He was speaking exclusively to SABC News ahead of next week's Heads of State UN General Assembly in New York.
I think what has happened in Kenya, I don't know the details, but I understand that the Supreme Court has decided based on a number of aspects related to the way the rules are established that demonstrates the vitality of the Kenyan democracy. I mean, it is independently of whether this decision is or not, I'm not judging the decision, I'm saying, I mean, it's good to have a country in which the government wins the election, but there is a judicial authority that is sufficiently independent to decide that the elections need to be repeated, independently of the merits of the decision. Right. And this proves that democracy in Africa is something that can exist.
Another story that's been trending throughout the night, at least 7 people have been killed on 4 different islands in the Caribbean by Hurricane Irma. The dual island nation of Antigua and Barbuda was especially hard hit. Described as one of the most powerful Atlantic storms on record, the dangerous Category 5 hurricane is passing the north coast of Puerto Rico. More than half of Puerto Rico's population of 3 million people is without power. On its current course, Irma, with winds of 300 kilometers per hour, was on track to reach Florida in the United States over the weekend. President Trump has approved a pre-landfall emergency for Florida.
Africa is constantly getting new technologies, and with that comes new terms.
Massive, open, online university. And primarily what they are doing is they're established in the community, so they're well established within the Soweto community.
Internet of Things also covers small sensors, so you can do like home security, motion detectors, IP cameras.
Our network will simplify these terms for you. We also have new gadgets and social media.
When it falls on the grounds and then the battery, everything falls off, people just put it all together and then your phone is back in shape.
The Vega app, we initially started off by doing this manually.
The internet is actually my favorite fashion invention of all time.
That's Network with Ms. Pumelele Zondi every Sunday at 9 p.m. on SABC News.
Reacting to the death of a grade 2 learner who allegedly committed suicide at a Mpumalanga primary school, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, SADC, says that more needs to be done to raise awareness as the suicide rate for children aged 10 to 14 years old has more than doubled in the last 15 years. A clinical psychologist for the South African Depression and Anxiety Group says that while it is uncommon for a child to take his or her own life, the number of child suicides in the country is on the rise. Now, you remember 9-year-old Lebo Maseko. He was found hanging from a school swing on Friday with a tunic belt tied around his neck. Now, to talk to us about the child and teen suicides, we are joined from SADC by Lan Lurie. She is the clinical psychologist at SADC. A very good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
First and foremostly, how prevalent is child or teen suicide for that matter?
Look, I think that in South Africa, it is something that is certainly on the rise. And obviously, it's a tragic statistic because those children are not just numbers. They have families, they have friends that are left behind who grapple to find an explanation as to why this actually happened.
The statistic that bothered me is that children between the ages of 10 and 14, the suicide rate has doubled in the last 15 years. What are some of the contributing factors here, you think?
So look, I think that certainly our family structures have changed on one level. I think that, you know, both parents are required to work, and so children may be left without supervision. You also have child-headed households. There may also be a family history of depression and suicide or suicide attempts. I think that the pressure on children to succeed academically and the pressure to obviously, you know, to ultimately perform in the workplace is there as well. I think that very often the signs of depression or, you know, irritable behavior within the child may be missed. And that's also because certain children may not have the ability to actually vocalize what's going on. You know, perhaps they've been subjected to some kind of trauma. They may also be the victims of bullying or cyberbullying. And it may be that, you know, behavior which parents may see as rebellious may actually be that the child is calling out for help.
Now, what can be done about suicides that do not have those obvious suicide signs that parents might be, or teachers might be able to see?
So look, I think that we need to work on a systemic level. You know, we need to create more awareness for both parents, teachers, other relevant stakeholders in terms of what to look out for. You know, essentially we say to parents, you are the experts on your child's level of functioning. If you notice any change, don't be afraid to ask the question. And also create open forums, even if there's not something that you're worried about. Check in on your child. What's happening at school? What's happening within their social and friendship group? What are they being exposed to online? You know, also, the other thing to also realize is that both children and teenagers may be prone to impulsive behavior. You know, if a child, for example, has not been taught to cope with a sense of failure or something not working out, are they prone to act impulsively, or are they going to look for help? Very often, a child or a teenager may seek means to relieve distress that can often have devastating consequences.
Let's take a look at the issue of Lebo Maseko, who was found hanging from a school swing with a tunic around his neck. Is that perhaps an accident, or is this suicide? What is your conclusion at the end, SADC?
Look, I think it's very, very hard to make a final judgment on what the circumstances were. Very often with children, suicides appear to be an accident. You know, it's almost easier for those left behind to rationalize it and say, okay, they were playing around, they were experimenting. However, I think that what this tragedy also shows is that children actually do understand that death is permanent.
Yes.
And very often a child may have endured some kind of trauma or been exposed to something untoward, and they may feel that they're not able to talk about it. And for them, that seems like the only way out.
Let's not talk about teens, because sometimes teens could experiment in different ways.
Yes.
Now, a teen that has previously attempted suicide, are they more at risk, or the highest at risk in that category, perhaps?
They are definitely more at risk. I think that if that has been a means by which they seek to, seek relief, or they seek to end their lives, that teen definitely has to be observed more closely for any further risk-taking behavior. We also need to look at the teen and see, has there been a history of self-harming behavior? Has there been a history of experimenting, let's say, with drugs and alcohol? You know, what have they been exposed to via social media? I mean, most recently, there's a controversy in America over the Netflix movie 13 Reasons Why.
Yes.
And how it almost sensationalizes suicide, and as a result, are there teenagers that were thinking about suicide that then are given the impetus to try? And then on the other hand, there also may be teenagers then who've been contemplating suicide, and as a result, they're not able to reach out for help.
Now, detection is always great beforehand, because afterwards it's a complete, you don't even want to go into that. But do all suicides or suicidal people talk about their potential suicide before they do it?
Some people don't. And I think that it's important to also to listen to the content of what your child or teen may be saying. You know, are they starting to give away things that previously had sentimental value to them? You know, are they talking as if life has no future? They can't see the future. They don't have hope. And other times, if somebody really wants to go through with it, and I think it's a very, very hard thing to come to terms with, they may not talk about it.
Leanne, just some advice for parents and even teachers out there today listening to this particular program on how to perhaps spot or maybe engage the teenager or youngster, or, in relation to suicide.
I think we have to debunk the myth that talking about suicide is going to lead somebody to commit suicide. And I think those are the crucial conversations to have with children and teens. I think look out for a change in behavior. You know, a child that may be struggling academically, you have to look, are they depressed? Is there some other kind of manifestation regarding impulsivity, such as attention deficit disorder? Intervene where you see that the child may be struggling. I think we need to remember that with both children and adolescents, behavior has communication value. Rather than labeling it as manipulative or as being rebellious or naughty, actually kind of look underneath and involve the relevant helping professions where needed.
If people need to talk to SADC, how do they get hold of you?
So they can call both helplines on 0800 212223 or 0800 567 567, or the website www.sadag.org.
I thank you so much for joining us here this morning.
Thank you very much.
Now that was Leanne Lurie. She's a clinical psychologist at the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, and you can call them. But remember, we are asking you a question this morning, all gang related, of course, what we've seen in the country. What are your views relating to young people joining gangs? That's what we ask you. You can let us know at SABC Newsroom on our Twitter handle. Now on the Twitter feed, Vincent Stewart says, the perfect way to draw your youth into these gangs is to build more blocks of flats in impoverished areas. Perfect breeding ground for that. Well, dark one there from Vincent. Blackstone says they tend to idolize the wrong people. The guys who are supposed to motivate them rather, move to the suburbs and only pitch when there's a function. This one from Maya Baby says, clearly these absent fathers are not men. In the real sense of the word, there should be laws to make them take responsibility for their children. Now, these are some of your comments on the question in relation to gang violence and, of course, absent fathers. That's something else that we touched on a little bit earlier, so you can still engage with us on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. But we're also conducting a poll. Somebody needs to do their job. They need 100 million rand. That is the NPA. Sean Abrams asked that in Parliament yesterday, so we're asking you, should the government give the NPA an additional 100 million rand? 282 votes are in. 77% of you are saying, no way, Jose. You can't give that kind of money. Lucky Maxwell Tuala says, yes, it's a useless office and it's captured. So says Lucky. He's not so lucky this morning. Vincent Stewart says, the NPA don't need the money. What they need is the will to prosecute. Or best still, fire the whole useless lot. Wow, very harsh words there. Otsile says it's wasteful expenditure. Those are some of your comments. Keep them coming. It's open 24 hours. We'll take a look at that poll again sometime, but right now, we'll take a break. After that, Kendall Makamate will be back with your sports news.
meteorite hit the Earth 2 million years ago, creating an enormous impact of crater, about 10 kilometers in diameter, near Vredefort in the Free State, 100 kilometers southwest of Johannesburg, now known as the Vredefort Dome, a South African World Heritage Site. The meteorite is said to have been larger than Table Mountain and caused a 1,000 megaton blast of energy. The impact would have heated about 70 cubic kilometers of rock and have increased the Earth's oxygen levels to a degree that made the development of multicellular life possible. The world has about 130 crater structures of possible impact origin. The Vredefort Dome is the largest in the world, followed by Sudbury Crater in Canada and the Chicxulub Crater in Mexico.
Welcome back. My name is Kendall Makhamat. The time for the sports right here on Newsroom. The time has just hit 19 minutes to 11. And really, it's not raining, but pouring for Bafana Bafana. Following back-to-back 2-1 losses to small island nation Cabo Verde in the 2018 FIFA World Cup qualifiers, the Bureau for the FIFA World Cup qualifiers ordered a replay of the qualification match between South Africa and Senegal, held on the 12th of November 2016. Bafana Bafana won the match 2-1 at the Peter Mokaba Stadium in Polokwane, thanks to goals by Thulani Serero and captain Thulani Hlatshwayo, who scored after a controversial penalty decision. The decision to replay the match follows the confirmation of the Court of Arbitration for Sport to uphold the lifetime ban of match referee Joseph Lamptey for match manipulation. Hlatshwayo's penalty was scored after a handball that clearly did not touch the Senegalese player. The match will be replayed during the November 2017 international window. Now, the decision is still subject to confirmation by the organizing committee for FIFA competitions at its next meeting scheduled for the 14th of September. Bafana Bafana are at the bottom of Group D on 4 points, of which 3 come from that match in question. And Bidvest's coach Gavin Hunt is one of the opinion that his team has not been performing badly, but have been unfortunate not to score. He was speaking ahead of the MTN 8 second leg semi-final against Cape Town City on Sunday.
Wits has not been able to beat Cape Town City this season. They have suffered narrow defeats in the 2 matches they've played, which included a league fixture. However, it's not because they couldn't match City's intensity. They were just not clinical in front of goal. It's the reason that Hunt feels if they continue with what he believes was a good performance in the first leg and right the wrongs, his team should progress to the final.
It's important that we certainly have better concentration at those critical phases of the game and be better from there. But, you know, as I said, I don't think it's for lack of opportunity. I don't think it's for lack of intensity. I don't think it's for lack of effort. Attitudes have been good, so I can't really fault it. Sometimes in football it doesn't always go like that for you, and you've got to just keep battling and keep working through it, and that's all that you can do in football.
Hunt was not too concerned about the international break interrupting his preparations, with 4 of his key players on duty for their countries. Captain Thulani Hlatshwayo, left backs Fiso Hlanti, and midfielder Dalen Claassen were with Bafana Bafana, while Amr Kamal was with the Egyptian national side. Lebhan Tube, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And news from early this morning, third-seeded Swiss Roger Federer's hope of a 3rd Grand Slam tennis title this year has ended. It's now over. Kaput. Federer was stunned in 4 sets by Argentina's Juan Martín El Potro in the quarterfinals of the US Open in New York. Women's top seed Karolina Pliskova of the Czech Republic was also sent packing. American Coco van der Weyck upset Pliskova in straight sets.
Ahead of the Del Potro clash, Federer had not lost a Grand Slam match this year. But the Swiss legend was struggling in New York, while Del Potro was impressive, especially in his epic 5-set victory over 6th-seeded Austrian Dominic Thiem. Del Potro won the first set, Federer the second, and the Swiss seemed set to take the third in the tiebreak. But Federer spectacularly squandered 4 set points. And Del Potro eventually clinched it, a turning point in the match. In the fourth, Del Potro broke the Federer's serve in the fifth game and never looked back. He bagged it 6-4 to set up a semi-final clash against top-seeded Spaniard Rafael Nadal.
I played my best match of the tournament. I did everything well. I served so good. I hit my forehand as hard as I can. And I think we played a great match and I deserve to win in the end.
Del Potro's victory means Federer and Nadal will end another year having never played each other at the US Open. Nadal, meanwhile, was in sublime form against Russian teenager Andrei Rublev. The Spaniard, who will now hold on to the #1 ranking ahead of Federer, recorded a 6-1, 6-2, 6-2 win in an hour and 40 minutes. In the women's draw, American 20th seed Van der Wey continued her dream run in New York. She upset an out-of-sorts Pliskova 7-6, 6-3. And 15th seed Madison Keys ensured that the American woman made it 4 from 4 for the semi-finals. She beat Estonia's Kaia Kanepi in straight sets to advance to her second Grand Slam semi-final. Liesel Zankel, SABC News.
Now, a little earlier on the show, I played an interview I'd had with sports journalist Vatangobeni on his reflections on Mgebisa, who's being laid to rest today. I also spoke to him about rugby matters. I asked him about the state of affairs on the rugby world after the Kings and Cheetahs had joined the Northern Hemisphere competition, the Pro 14. This is what he had to say.
Well, SARU didn't fully come out with what criteria was used. Because instead what they did was a very, very clever way of PR and spinning the whole story in that they said that the Kings and the Cheetahs voluntarily decided to exit the competition and obviously explore other options, which was obviously to play in the Pro 14 up north. But there had been a franchise committee that had been set up when the decision was made by SANZA that 2 South African teams will be X and 1 Aussie team as well. And, one would have thought, that the thinkings of that committee would be they need to look at the financial sustainability of a franchise. They need to look at previous results, historical results, and current, Super Rugby results and performances. And I think more than anything, you start looking at, the viability and long-term sustainability of franchises. You look at what's happened in the Eastern Cape, border, Eastern Province, and to a lesser extent, Southwestern districts. Those are unions that, without a shadow of doubt, are under administration. So the administration comes to question, first of all. You look at the Cheetahs, they're dwindling stadium numbers, and they'll admit they were in financial difficulty as well, under financial strain. So, it was probably very easy for SARU to sort of, convince them to step away from Super Rugby instead of the decision having to be made by SARU itself.
Right, now let's look at the first weekend that the Cheetahs and Kings had in the Pro 14. It wasn't the big roar that we were expecting, more of a whimper. But having said that, we didn't really expect much more than a great attempt at playing Northern Hemisphere rugby. What do you make of it? Was it what you thought would happen?
Well, I'm glad, first of all, those two teams have got a place to play. Secondly, the performances they put up. The scoreboard doesn't reflect the really, really Herculean performances both sides put up. And, everyone says, what's a Pro 14 or Pro 12 back then? They think the second tier of European rugby. It might be the second tier of European rugby, but you look at the teams that are playing there. The likes of Ulster, which the Cheetahs played against. They've got Irish internationals. They had some South African internationals as well, like Jean Tazel. We saw the likes of Louis playing for Ulster. And then you saw the Kings, they played against the Scarlets, who were defending champions. The likes of Lee Halfpenny, guys who played international rugby for Wales and Ireland, played in those two sides. So to expect those teams to just walk in there and bulldoze away would be asking for too much. But I think they really stood their ground and they would have taken some big learnings from just the first week of Pro 14.
Let's talk a little bit about the exodus of players from South African rugby. Do you think this will affect the exodus of players from South African rugby?
I think it will stem the tide in that now guys get an opportunity to actually play in Europe, but play for South African sides, So they still have all the comforts of being at home, but they from time to time can play in Europe. And hopefully this will increase the revenue streams that come into the coffers of SARU in order for those franchises like the Kings and the Cheetahs to be able to pay competitive, salaries, because a lot of the time the players don't leave because they want to leave. They leave because, there's more money on the other side. So if you are able to pay them money with home comforts as well, I can guarantee you now, a lot of players will stay in the country.
And the Currie Cup seems to be the ugly stepchild these days. The effect on the Currie Cup with this move?
Well, it boggles the mind how the people at Saru think they're going to take the Currie Cup and just chuck it in the middle of the calendar without actually putting proper thought into it. We've got a situation now where the Cheetahs are defending champions, but they're playing almost their C team. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot. Talk about cutting your nose to spite your face. And again, Saru need to sit down, have a proper think about how Currie Cup is going to fit in, especially with the global calendar coming into effect in 2020. We've got Super Rugby now that we know will end in May. We've got the internationals that we know will happen in June. And then we've got the Rugby Championship that kicks off in August. You've got to fit in the Currie Cup somewhere. You've got to make sure that all this competition, domestic competition in World Rugby still has a place, because it remains still the feeder to whether you're a Pro 14 side now or a Super Rugby side. It remains the feeder. That is the breeding ground of future rugby stars in this country. And the Currie Cup cannot be treated the way it is at the moment.
Let's go a little overseas. The Force is taking the Australian Rugby Union to court, and they lost their case. They're going to go to the High Court now. They're now threatening to start an Indo-Pacific tournament. Does this mean possibly a start where we look at a tournament that's got some American teams in it?
Well, I don't know about American teams. I think we'll find a lot of Pacific Island teams, teams from Fiji, Samoa, and they'll obviously go look into Asia, into Japan as well. That's where I think the basis of that competition will be, and that's where it will make sense for the Force. I think the fact that they want to appeal this decision it's meaningless, because
neither here nor there.
Yeah, the decision has not been made by SANZA, and the ARU was part of the decision. In the same way that Saru was part of the decision, and they said, okay, we'll do it this way, and they went about it very, very quickly. Saru. What the ARU is doing, or what the Force are doing, they're just making this a drawn-out process. It's going to be more painful, and it's going to be extremely detrimental to rugby in Australia, which is already suffering at low attendances, lack of sponsorship, and lack of interest from the Australian public.
In closing, is this the beginning of the end for SANZA, all these movements?
I don't think it's the beginning of the end for SANZA. I think SANZA can only get stronger, especially, as I said, with the globally coming in, global calendar coming into force in 2020. What SANZA now has to do is that they need to be extremely clever about how they go about doing it. You look at the axis of South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. Those teams are, they joined at the hip. They so rely on each other. For the strength of rugby in the Southern Hemisphere and the dominance of Southern Hemisphere teams in World Rugby. So I think SANZA without South Africa won't happen, SANZA without Australia won't happen, and definitely SANZA without New Zealand won't happen. So I think SANZA need to sit down, come up with a better strategy, but I think for all of this, they will end up being a stronger body.
Now, very interesting views there from Vata Ngobeni on what's happening in the world of rugby, Currie Cup, SANZA, Pro 14, and so on and so forth. A news that's just come out this morning about the Bok lineup this morning is how Ross Cronje is now back in the squad to face Australia over the weekend in the Rugby Championship. And we've also got Henry Pollard on the bench. But as you can see, I'm with Phil. It's time for the weather. And Phil, I've been quite concerned about what's going on in Cape Town. There's been absolutely no rain. What's happening there?
Yeah, there's been a little bit of rain here and there, but nothing really, not even nearly enough to, nothing substantial, nothing that's filling up the dams. So we're still sitting with water restrictions. We're coming to the end of the rainy season. In fact, it's really starting to peter out now in terms of what rainfall is left in Cape Town. So we're really looking pretty dire at the moment, eh? Yeah, but now a place that we know has been having a lot of rain, in fact, hurricane-style rain is the Caribbean. Yeah, a lot of rain. In fact, there are 3 hurricanes in the Caribbean at the moment. Well, in the Atlantic Ocean at the moment. The strongest of which, of course, being Irma, and this is the photos of Irma at the moment here that you're seeing, the graphics there. Such a strong hurricane. It's a factor 5, category 5 hurricane, which is as strong as they can possibly get. And meteorologists in the US are saying that if there was a category 6, which there never has been in recorded history before in the model that they use, if there was ever to be a category 6, this would be it. Wow, the strongest in the Atlantic on recorded time. That's very interesting. You know what? I think I'll leave it right there with you. I think it's now time to do the weather proper with Phil Hawkins. All right. Right, yes, time for the weather. Let's take a look at what's happening. We're going to start off with South Africa's weather. Dry conditions remaining through South Africa's central interior here. Bit of cloud cover is starting to develop as we move through the day through just that central region around Botswana and just starting to extend into South Africa's northeastern interior. It's only a little bit of cloud cover, no rainfall at all, but some rainfall coming in relation to a low pressure system and a cold front, which is moving through the area. As we progress into tomorrow, another secondary cold front comes through, not particularly strong. It's just bringing in those isolated showers to the southwest again, not bringing in too much cloud cover continuing either. Might just see some cloud cover starting to extend along that southern coastline into tomorrow. No rainfall, clear skies throughout most, if not all of the rest of the southern hemisphere of Africa. So let's take a look on that note at what you can expect in terms of your temperatures. A cold one in the southwest with Cape Town at 16 degrees for a maximum today as that cold front passes. Warmer ahead of it, 22 in Port Elizabeth, a warm day in Durban at 29 degrees. In Pretoria, peaks at 31 with the central interior up near the 30-degree mark there in Bloemfontein. Now, clear conditions are forecast throughout our central neighbouring states there. Maun, Francistown, Gaborone, all clear, temperatures in the 30s. The same with the landlocked country of Zimbabwe. 33-degree highs forecast for Victoria Falls, 27 for Harare. Of course, moving on into the eastern coast, what we do see is some cloud cover developing around Nampula and Beira, not yielding too much rainfall, if any, at all. Some light showers around Morone with 29-degree maximums, and Antananarivo there, peaks at 30. Now, what we're seeing for today's weather for the northern regions here of southern Africa, of the southern hemisphere of Africa, should I say, we're seeing a bit of rainfall coming in. That rainfall starting to extend a little bit further south as we move through the change of season there. Bangui at 29 degrees, Kinshasa 32, and Luanda at 29 degrees. Luanda getting some rainfall for the first time in a while, at least some fairly substantial rainfall, isolated to scattered showers there. You can see those showers extending through into parts of Cameroon, parts of Nigeria, extending through the Central African Republic once again, isolated to scattered showers forecast in some areas. And towards West Africa's southern coastline, isolated showers over the southern coast, but some stronger stormy systems moving through the interior for today. Into tomorrow, that does intensify, but specifically along the coastlines of Liberia and surrounding countries there. A little bit of rainfall again continuing through most of the central regions here, and towards the Ethiopian highlands, some storms developing. Very quickly, a couple of temperatures. Now, Cairo's at 35 degrees, Tripoli 37, and Agadez 40. Khartoum, peaks of 42. Some very hot conditions indeed. That's where we're going to leave your weather for now. Stay with us here on the SABC.
What guides us? Is it something you can see?
We need deliverance from sin, because God never
Hear?
carry on working to spread the message
Feel?
to the whole world.
Or touch? What leads us onto greater experiences? Is it the words of our sacred texts? The advice of our elders? Or is it the actions of our people? The strength of our beliefs? Or the voices of our citizens? Your country is guided by the voices of its people, and your broadcaster is dependent on your voice to guide it. Get your copy of the SABC's editorial policy and have your say.
It's the final hour here on the Newsroom Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Preslin.
I'm Kendall Makamat.
And we'll be with you until 12 o'clock today. The focus is on children joining gangs, especially in our townships, Kendall, and it's a worrying trend that we're looking at.
It is. It's not just the older generation that's getting involved with gangs. It's children as young as 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 carrying guns and doing the bidding of their gang masters.
And we also heard from some of the previous speakers we had here. It's about absent fathers as well in the homes, as well as looking for the children looking for belonging and a sense of security. And that's why we're asking you that question. What are your views relating to young people joining gangs?
Let's see what you say. Jamila van der Skeef says this is the major issue concerning the youth. They need to get part-time jobs or become involved in recreational activities, maybe sports. It makes a big difference. We know in Finland they've done it and it works.
I tell you, growing up, that was my inclination. Playing sport and getting involved with extramural activities. Work on a farm and earning 50 cents a day. Sitelo says the question we should be grappling with is, where have we gone wrong as a society, instead of pointing fingers at certain people? Those are some of your comments. Please keep them coming. But we're also running a poll today. Somebody needs some money.
Yes,
I need some money, y'all.
That's exactly the song that Sean Abrams is singing in Parliament. He wants the government to give him an extra 100 million rand for the running of the NPA.
So, 311 votes are in. 76% are saying no. Government shouldn't give them that money. 24% are saying yes, they need to do their job.
Yes, Ben Tita says, well, we know where the money will be given. We know it won't be used for the sole purpose of running the NPA.
This one from Philander says, the NPA is doing nothing anyway. Why would they want more money? Well, keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But we're also doing a sports question for you today. FIFA now has decided that Bafana will not get the points that they've earned apparently in November last year.
Well, look, they did earn it. The referee called the match. He said it's 2-1 to Bafana in November the 12th, 2016 against Senegal. But that referee has been banned by FIFA for match fixing, and FIFA has thus pulled back that match and said Bafana need to replay it against Senegal in November.
Where are they going to play it, here or there? We don't know yet.
Still needs to be said.
But here's what you are telling us. Romo Horde says this is very unacceptable. What happened to the referee decision is final. Lots of games were influenced by the referee. Henry, his hand goal. Well, as Kendall just indicated, you know, that particular referee was banned for life.
Yes, and Joseph Lamptey gone. He's not going to be refereeing any more FIFA matches. Alex Mtapa says, fair play. To qualify, you need to work hard. Nothing wrong from FIFA's decision.
Well, there you have it. We'll read all those comments as they come in, but right now, let's take a look at your news headlines. The National Prosecuting Authority wants an additional 100 million rand in order to continue its operations. The EFF leader, Julius Malema, once says he doesn't need anybody's permission to attend the funeral service of former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Magaka. And ferocious winds from Hurricane Irma have flattened the Dutch Caribbean island of St. Martin's, killing at least 6 people and destroying the airport. Now, those are some of your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much. It's been a very busy morning of sports. Lots of action coming out of the US Open, as well as some interesting decisions made by FIFA about Bafana, which is exactly what we're talking about right here. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. FIFA orders the World Cup qualifier between South Africa and Senegal, played in November last year, to be replayed after they banned the referee for match fixing.
More of a hometown decision. Lumpty Dumpty.
I don't think it's for lack of opportunities. I don't think it's for lack of intensity. I don't think it's for lack of effort. The attitudes have been good, so I can't really fault it. Sometimes in football, it doesn't always go like that for you.
Gavin Hunt is hoping for a bit of luck when he faces his protege, Benny McCarthy, in the second leg MTN8 semi-final tie.
Del Potro's back in the US Open semi-finals.
Argentine Juan Martín Del Potro denies the tennis world the match it had been anticipating as he saves 2 set points against Roger Federer to set up a semi-final against another crowd favorite, Rafael Nadal.
Well, I played him in 2009 too, and as the same rushers, and hopefully I can repeat the result.
Phenomenal. By all intents and purposes, this is going to be a very exciting last few matches at Flushing Meadows. All this and more a little later in the Sports Bulletin. For now, do stay with Elvis as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. The 25th commemoration of the Bhisho massacre near Bhisho Stadium in Eastern Cape is being held today. The Eastern Cape Premier, Phumulo Masualle, is expected to deliver a keynote address there. 28 protesters and 1 soldier was shot dead in 1992 when marchers descended on Bhisho to demand free political activity in the Ciskei apartheid homeland and the removal of its leader, Brigadier Oupa Khoza. Now, more than 200 people were injured. The protesters were led by senior ANC leaders, including the late SACP Secretary-General Chris Hani, Cyril Ramaphosa and Ronnie Castrals. We now go live to our SABC reporter, Busisiwe Jamsana, and she's with the Premier of the Eastern Cape. A very good morning to you, Busisiwe. Before you speak to your guests, can you tell us what does it look like there? What can we expect from the 25th anniversary of the Bhisho massacre?
A very good morning indeed. The 7th of September 1992, a day that is still being remembered even today, 25 years later. A reminder to the families, to the province and the country at large, where heroes were gunned down. You've just crossed to me. The Premier have just finished with the families laying wreath. This is a graveyard where some of the victims were buried. A reminder to say we salute you, to say we recognize you, we acknowledge the efforts that you have put in the fight for this democratic South Africa. Now, it may seem as if it happened long ago, but to families, it is a reminder, to victims, to the survivors of that massacre, that deadly massacre. It is still something that they remember like it was yesterday. Year in, year out, there are commemorations remembering this day. We are joined by the Premier, Phumulo Masualle. Premier, year in, year out, we see you having these commemorations, remembering these fallen heroes. But more than laying wreath and remembering this day, is there any significant plans to make sure that these families are taken care of?
Well, firstly, it is not just about the families, it's about all of us. Yes, in respect of the projects we do, because many of the families were affected. They lost their loved ones, they lost their parents, they lost breadwinners. To that extent, through government programs, we have sought to integrate them. To the extent we are succeeding in that, it's something that we are monitoring progressively. But above all, today, yes, it's about remembering the martyrs. It's about ourselves as well, so that we can, through this, constantly be reminded that we are where we are because others laid down their lives for us to have what we have today. So it also serves as an inspiration to those whose conscience ought to be upright, so that we should always remember that what we have was paid for and many people lost their lives for it. So yes, it is about all of us, it's about the families, it is also about all the freedom-loving people of our country. 23 years post our independence, we've got to look at ourselves, look at the progress we've made, whether we're making the correct or the right measures of progress. Through this, be re-energized, reinvigorated to do more in order to achieve the just and democratic dispensation for our country.
Some of the things they want, Premier, is for the government of the day to create jobs for them, to have bursaries for their children, to make sure that they're in projects. But is it sustainable, considering that over 200 people were injured and we're talking about 28 families that lost their loved ones?
We do as much as we could. But remember, it's not just this. There are many other sites like this countrywide. But those who come from those homesteads, through government programs, we seek to have them looked after. They must get support in the form of bursaries, as you're saying, for their children. They must get employment opportunity. Of course, like other people, we're trying to have special focus among others. As I was saying, we are monitoring it progressively. No one can bring back. There is not even an amount of money you could pay for a lost life. But it is celebrating that that life was lost in pursuit of a good cause. And that is what always keeps us going.
Premier, because of time, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. That was the Eastern Cape Premier, Phumulo Maswale, saying that they're doing all they can to make sure that families of the victims and those who were injured during that fateful day are taken care of in terms of creating employment for them and making sure that their children have bursaries, as difficult as it would be considering the number of people that were affected and the other sites and other important days that are similar to this one. Moving from here, we are going to be going to Bhisho, the Bhisho Stadium, where the Premier is expected to give a keynote address to speak to the families, relatives, and the people at large about the plans that they have and what is the plan moving forward. From us, it is back to you in studio.
Thank you, Busisiwe Jemsana, coming to us live from the commemoration there that's happening today. Now, National Director of Public Prosecutions, Sean Abrams, says that the National Prosecuting Authority wants an additional 100 million rand in order to continue its operations. Abrams also addressed several other issues with the Justice Portfolio Committee, including state capture investigations and Grace Mugabe.
The NPA is falling short of meeting its performance targets. Abrams blames this on the critical shortage of investigative and prosecutorial capacity within the NPA. It's already lost 55 staffers since April. An additional 157 officials left the prosecutorial authority during the 2016-2017 financial year.
We're sitting in a situation where there are 45 critical posts that we have to fill now as a matter of urgency. As a second phase to that, there's another 112 posts that we've got to have those posts advertised within the next few weeks.
Abrams also briefed MPs on the state of the investigations into state capture.
The first leg is, of course, what we refer to as the mentor investigation. The second leg is the Jonas investigation. The third leg is the Government Communications Information System and the New Age investigation. The fourth leg relates to the allegations of Eskom and Tegeta. The fifth leg relates to the allegations in respect of Transnet and Trillion. The sixth leg relates to the allegations in respect of Denal and the VR laser investigation.
The NPA boss also says he believes that Zimbabwean First Lady Grace Mugabe should have been charged for the alleged assault of a young woman at a Sandton hotel last month. Lukhanya Kalada, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, 100 million rand needed, and that's why we're asking you the question on the poll. Do you think that government should provide the NPA the additional 100 million rand that they need? Well, so far, 311 votes in. 76% of you are saying, no way, Jose. They shouldn't get that 100 million rand. And only 24% are saying, yes, they should get it. So we'll come back to some of your comments in a short while, but further scrutiny of the Gupta leaks have implicated the suspended Eskom CFO Anoj Singh in fresh Gupta kickback claims. Now, the media investigative units, Amabungani and Scorpio, says that evidence points to a criminal conspiracy to defraud South Africans of billions of rands. Singh is the former CFO of Transnet, and he's currently on suspension at Eskom. We spoke to investigative journalist Craig McEwen earlier and asked him what the latest was on the former CFO.
What's new is that we have substantial evidence of him taking benefit from the Guptas, and quite a lot of it. And that is at the same time that he is overseeing the money at Transnet and then later at Eskom. And we see billions of contracts go out at Transnet, for which we've identified large numbers of kickbacks, which did flow to the Guptas. And then the pattern continued when he moved over to Eskom. And all along he was taking benefits from the Guptas, so that's starting to look a lot like bribery.
The National Prosecuting Authority, Sean Abrahams, was speaking today, saying when it comes to the Gupta leaks, just because he's silent, it doesn't mean that nothing's happening. Does that inspire confidence? Everybody's waiting to see what will the repercussions be.
I'm hugely inspired to hear that. But yeah, let's see what the repercussions would be. I think somebody should have probably picked up Anoj Singh by now to ask him some very, very serious questions, just on the basis of evidence that's already out there.
The evidence that's out there does link him to Dubai, to accepting hotel stays, things like that. He was involved in this huge contract that you mentioned at Transnet. The kickbacks there, nearly 6 billion rand, so not small amounts. Remind us of the proof that he was lining the pockets of the Guptas.
Look, it looks like it looks systematic when you analyze what happened at Transnet from 2011 through to 2015, when Anoj Singh and Brian Molefe left to go to Eskom. Transnet launched a 300 billion rand capital investment plan. They're going to buy locomotives, cranes, and there are all sorts of services that need to go with those. They need IT, they need telecoms, they need financial advisory services, and so on. And so there was a lot of money to be spent, and at every place where we can get a glimpse into the details, we find fingerprints of the Guptas and their employees and their people and their friends being involved. And now what we see in the Gupta leaks, we found a number of actual kickback contracts from contractors with Transnet, so they supplied services or goods to Transnet, and they agreed on the back of those contracts to pay money offshore to Dubai or to Hong Kong. And those companies receiving that money were channeling that money into Gupta accounts in Dubai. And we see that in the Gupta leaks, in their internal accounting records. We see it in their emails. We see it in their SWIFT transfers. And we see billions and billions flowing.
And there was a shell company apparently opened by the Guptas for Anoj Singh himself. Can we see what's going in and out of that?
No, we can't, and that's exactly the point. It's in the Emirate Ras Al Khaimah, and it's very well known for its financial secrecy. It's also a tax haven. There's 0% tax there. But they are very, very serious there about their banking secrecy. So money that's going in and out of accounts in that emirate is not going to be easily seen by any law enforcement authority anywhere in the world. And that's specifically what that country does, what that financial jurisdiction does. So that I think is incredibly worrying, that the Guptas gave him a company like that. And they happened to pick up that company 3 days after the locomotive contractor got its Transnet contract. And as soon as the money started rolling into the Gupta's accounts in Dubai, we see them giving that company to Anoj Singh. Circumstantially, that looks extremely bad.
The Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, says that he will attend the funeral of the former ANC Youth League Secretary General Sindiso Magaka. However, a thorough security assessment will need to be done. Malema was speaking after he graduated with a BA Honours in Philosophy at UNISA in Pretoria.
Still reeling from the pain of Magaka's passing away, Malema says he would like to pay his respects and find peace following the trauma he suffered at the news of his death. But he has raised security concerns about attending Magaka's funeral.
I will attend his funeral if conditions allow, because in that funeral, and what is more painful about politics is that the people who kill you are the ones who are going to preside over your funeral and use your funeral to popularize themselves. So we ought to be careful about that. Only when conditions allow, we'll attend Magaka's funeral.
Malema says Makaka was killed for standing against corruption. He expressed his frustration at what he called a stunt by the ANC Youth League in KwaZulu-Natal in extending an invite for him to attend Makaka's funeral. Malema says he does not need anyone's invitation to bury Makaka. The EFF leader also touched on the party's recent frosty relationship with the Democratic Alliance. Malema, who started his undergraduate degree in 2011, has been kept yet again. He said a lot of sacrifices were made to reach his goal.
Mineral Resources Minister Mgebisa Zwane says that amendments to the country's mining laws are expected to be passed by December and provide greater investor certainty. Zwane was speaking at the Africa Down Under conference in Perth, Australia. Changes to the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act, the MPRDA, were initially passed by Parliament in 2015, but were then sent back to the President by President Jacob Zuma, due to concerns over their constitutionality. The concerns have been raised that, as with the mining charter, the Chamber of Mines might challenge amendments to the MPRDA. The Chamber represents about 95% of the country's mining sector. Now, the Labour Court in Johannesburg will hand down judgment tomorrow on who should pay the legal costs incurred over the dismissal of the SABC 8. This followed the unlawful dismissal of the journalist from the public broadcaster last year. Yesterday, the Labour Court heard lawyers for Unions, Solidarity and Bamau argue that the former SABC COO, Claudia Mutseneng, and the former news executive, Simon Tebele, should be held liable for the cost. This was opposed by lawyers for Mutseneng and Tebele, who want the SABC to pay the cost of last year's litigation. 7 of the 8 dismissed journalists were reinstated after obtaining a court order. Meanwhile, the National Assembly has approved the 12 recommended names to serve on the SABC board. Now, there were objections from the Democratic Alliance, the Economic Freedom Fighters and the ACDP, who criticized Phoebe Potgieter-Qubule as well as Krish Naidu as ANC deployees. Now, they are among the 5 members of the outgoing interim board who have made it to the permanent board, which starts work next month. The names will be sent to the President, Jacob Zuma, for his appointment. Or for their appointment, rather. Those are the members, the new members of the board. We await with bated breath on the new board. City Power expects power to be restored to the Johannesburg CBD soon. The Johannesburg Power Utility says its technicians are working throughout the night to repair the damage to its burned power cables. On Sunday, thieves gained access to the underground tunnels and cut out 15 million rand worth of copper cables, which was later recovered. 3 people were arrested, including one owner who tried to bribe the Metro Police officer with 10,000 rand in cash. Many businesses in the CBD have been affected.
Cable theft syndicates that operate in Johannesburg have been having it easy, damaging infrastructure and rendering the city dysfunctional for more than 3 days. City Power says the damage to the cables resulted from a fire set out during an attempted cable theft on Sunday morning. This affected multiple feeders and load centers at various substations in the central business district.
It is a very sophisticated syndicate. The way they operate, it clearly shows that they know what they are doing. Because they open the manholes in the inner city and went underground through the tunnels which are running on the streets of the CBD. It says a lot that they are specialized in this. They've been doing it for years.
Police nabbed 4 suspects. Copper with an estimated value of 15 million rand was discovered at the scene. It has been reported that the suspects sold it for only 400,000 rand in the black market. The SAPS was then led to a smelting area nearby. This massive smelter houses tons of raw scrap metal. It's difficult to differentiate legitimate copper from the stolen metal, as it is all mixed up.
The problem of cable theft is a major one in the city of Johannesburg, especially in light of the significant infrastructure challenges we face in the city. The city has an infrastructure backlog of well over 170 billion rand. That means every ounce and centimeter of infrastructure stolen from the residents of Johannesburg has massive impacts. The recent theft of copper cables from the underground streets of Joburg had a massive impact on a significant part of the inner city, plunging most of it into darkness. So that's something that we need to combat, and we need to make sure that there's no space for these criminal syndicates who would steal from the city, from the residents of Johannesburg, to function whatsoever.
Although power has now been restored in most areas, technicians have been working around the clock to carry out technical assessment on the extent of the damage to the underground cables. Operations at this scrapyard have been suspended immediately, and the police have sealed these premises as a crime scene. More arrests are expected to be made. Colin Limani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
The African National Congress, ANC, has raised concern about the recent statements by the Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, in which he criticizes the late struggle icon, former President Nelson Mandela. But there is no word from Zimbabwe on this matter.
How come the whites have been left with so much power? ANC. You can say it was because of your friend Mandela.
It is this statement that has irked South Africa's ruling party. At some point in time, former President Nelson Mandela had to respond to similar views.
A commentator from the BBC, many of you would have seen it, about 2 or 3 years ago, said Mandela is a useless chap. He has done nothing either for his country or for humanity. I then replied that I welcome such statement because they destroy this myth that somebody is an angel and cannot be criticized. I never wanted to be regarded as an angel. I'm an ordinary human being with weaknesses, some of them fundamental, and I've made many mistakes in my life. I am not a saint.
Now, the ANC has joined the fray in defense of its former president.
I phoned the Secretary General of ZANU-PF and I said to him, you see, Dr. Chombo, your president is all over Matiba, but the reality of the matter is that you have destroyed the economy in your country. We continue to create black millionaires in this country, including Zimbabwean millionaires. So refrain your president from making statements that are unresearched.
Today, ZANU-PF held its Politburo meeting, but no word from the party leadership. Sophie Mkweni, SABC News, Johannesburg.
The usage of community libraries by residents in the Northwest Province is extremely poor. Now, this emerged at the launch of National Book Week by the Provincial Department of Culture, Arts and Traditional Affairs in partnership with the South African Book Development Council in Itsoseng near Maikeng. Only 14% of the South African population are active book readers.
But I thought a king can do whatever he wants, said Simba.
A day of reading, poetry and fun activities. Children of all ages taught about the importance of reading. One of government's main challenges is keeping the youth interested in books.
We need to encourage the youth to read books that are on the electronic versions. And I mean, the importance of it is that while at least they're reading it, they can share information. They can share information even online.
Under the theme, Our Stories, the partnership encourages writers to offer relatable content.
We are saying, let's write about our own stories, let's read our stories, and let's help our children to read. Let's read to our children.
According to the South African Book Development Council, only 5% of parents read to their children, while 58% of the nation's households don't own books. Hence, a day like this to encourage the culture of reading in a small dorpi like Itsoseng. Government says the stereotype that libraries are only for intellectuals must be changed.
We would still want to see an increased number of usage of community libraries. We want to see more reading. We want to have a complaint coming from the library that all Setswana books that are on the shelves has been read and communities want to read more.
The young ones agree that reading is the future.
I enjoy reading because it teaches me the word that I didn't know, and it keeps me from the street, and it can make me my future bright.
National Book Week ends on Sunday. Olebogeng Khosilinswe, SABC News Itsoseng, near Mahikeng.
Yeah! Books, books. Yeah! Books, books. Yeah!
The Law Society has slammed notices sent to 4 universities to jack up standards or risk losing their LLB courses. The Council on Higher Education issued a stern warning to the universities to conform within 6 months.
I think it will affect the university. I think outside the law faculty, there's a funding issue.
It's been 112 years since Enoch Sontonga died as a relatively unknown composer, choir master and teacher. But today his legacy lives on through his greatest composition, Nkosi Sikeleli Afrika.
For all your news updates, stay tuned to Your World from Monday to Sunday.
Now, the second Design Scumto takes place on the 7th of September 2017 in Johannesburg. The event aims to create a developmental platform for design creatives. The Design Scumto is a textile and fashion design creative conference, and it's also an African colloquium term for dialogue. The premier event aims to engage and empower people who wish to pursue or even to grow a career in textile and fashion design industry. For more on this, we're joined by Craig Jacobs. Of course, he's a panelist and also speaker at the event. A very good morning to you and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Craig, first and foremostly, for those viewers that don't know what Scumto is, tell us about the Design Scumto and what does it actually mean?
Well, basically, the Design Scumto is actually giving people, especially emerging fashion entrepreneurs or people who are interested in the fashion industry or studying fashion, to get a little bit more insight into the workings of the fashion industry, especially people who might not necessarily have a great idea or started a business but don't know how to go forward in that. So it's quite a whole range of different things, panel discussions, dialogue, presentations to fashion entrepreneurs, providing them with insights into the industry.
Now, as a speaker at the event, tell us about your story.
Okay, so I was at the Design Scumto is actually happening right now in Sandton, and I just came from there where I gave a talk to the entrepreneurs and to the emerging designers there about my label, which is called Funduti. It's an African-inspired clothing label that I started about 10 years ago, and yeah, that's what I do.
And the type of shirt that you have on now, is that the type of design that we're talking about?
Yeah, this is mine. Design? So what I try to do is try and use as much African fabrics, whether it's shweshwe, vendor fabric, or wax prints from West Africa, and introduce a little bit more of a kind of contemporary silhouette to that.
And Design Scumto would help and assist artists or designers like yourselves to take them through the process and engage them a little bit more in order to assist them with marketing and creating a bigger flow of their business.
Well, as in emerging designers, so what I've been doing in terms of this part of the platform is telling people my story and providing them with information and tools so that they can learn the lessons that I've learned, so that they hopefully don't make the same mistakes I have.
Well, what were the challenges that you were confronted with whilst producing your own brand?
Well, I think, for me, there was two primary challenges. The one would be in terms of clothing and textile industry in South Africa. A lot has changed post 1994 in terms of access to global economy. We've become susceptible to imports. So it's become more difficult in terms of, we've seen like manufacturing industry, lots of jobs have been shed. So those were challenges in terms of finding the right infrastructure to be able to produce. And I think the other challenge that I found, and that's gradually changing, is pride in South Africans to wear South Africa. And I think that is traveling around the world. The Italians and the French, why they're so successful in fashion is because they embrace their designers.
How are we doing as South Africans? Are we getting to a point where you see that we're embracing South African fashion?
I think we are seeing quite a tidal change. It's amazing. I've had my label in one of the biggest retailers in South Africa. So that's great because you need to have access to markets.
Yes.
So that is changing. I think retailers, because people need to be able to have opportunities to be able to purchase merchandise. It's all great seeing pretty pictures, but you want to know where you can buy the merchandise. So those things have started to change.
Now, you're one of the panelists, but what other heavyweight panelists will there be?
So we have, in terms of the panel, we've had representatives from governments, from the Department of Arts and Culture, and we also have another fellow designer of mine, Laduma from Maktosa. He's also a part of the panel discussions.
Now, people can still get to the event today?
I believe they can, yes. It is running at the moment at the Santon Library, so people can come through.
And what is it that you want participants to take away from this, and what can they learn?
I think the most important thing that I'm trying to instill people is that for you to become successful, you need to do something that reflects who you are. And we are in Africa, so our design needs to be intuitive of Africa. There's no point trying to copy what Gucci does because they do it well.
Yes. So I'll be waiting for my next suit from Craig.
There we go, for sure.
African wear, that's what we need. That, of course, was Craig Jacobs. He is, well, a panelist as well as a speaker at the current Design Scumto taking place in Santon. You can go there right now. Go and take a look. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back after that.
The Pan-African Parliament, as a legislative body, could go a long way in continuing to promote women's rights in all African member states.
Moon will be elected president. A decisive win by him will provide much-needed stability in South Korea.
The Deputy President and the SADC Oversight Committee have been mandated to convene a multi-stakeholder national dialogue before elections.
5 teams are trapped in the relegation mud. These include Bloemfontein Celtic, 12th on the log, followed by Chipa United, Free State Stars and Baroka, who are second from the bottom, as well as Highlands Park, who have won only 4 matches.
We're on point with breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune in to Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
We're supposed to go to Kendall with the sports news, but as we speak, the African National Congress in KZN is briefing the media on political killings in the province. Let's go there live.
about regarding this team, the first team that will be investigating. We've heard from the Moerane Commission that, this is, the hitmen hired to shoot Cindy Somagaqa can be traced back to Cleveland. So how exactly will the ANC be going about this investigation, particularly because there's this perception that it's the ANC itself that's involved in all these political killings in the province, and like Biggie asked, will you be working closely with law enforcement authorities? Will you be speaking to people like Vanessa Berger who've made presentations before the Commission of Inquiry?
Okay. No, thanks very much. On the issue of the destabilization of the province, we are saying our investigation, yes, must deal with the criminality, investigate that. But we are saying during the apartheid era, all of us were convinced that it's a black-on-black violence. It's between the two parties. All of us were talking about it. But I think later on, we discovered that no, in the process, they were sponsored violence. So we are saying, looking at the pattern, the manner in which it was done by that time, killing people, destroying of evidence. It was not easy to catch criminals because we were looking for criminals within the organization. So they were saying, let's broaden our thinking, let's broaden our investigation. We are not saying this is what's happening. We are saying, looking at the pattern, it might be that we are faced with a similar issue. And it emerged by then that they targeted KwaZulu-Natal because they wanted to destabilize the whole country. You will understand. It was here in KwaZulu-Natal and it went to Gauteng and it was also spread all over. But it was very difficult in KwaZulu-Natal, very difficult in Gauteng because of hostels there. So we are not conclusive that this is what is happening, but we are saying, looking at that pattern, can we think aloud? So I think we must also you must also join us in saying that let's broaden our investigation. Let's think. Let's not think, because I think the focus now is that it's the issues within the ANC. Yes, we accept that, but if we are not, but if it was the issues within the ANC, this political work that we are doing, we think we should have ended this thing now. And the pattern in which it's happening, it's not a violence, it's assassination by well-trained people, highly trained people. I think that's what we're saying. Whether they do have expertise, those who will be investigating, we think, looking at what we are doing in the organization, we are able to get things and deal with things. So we'll have capable comrades who will be able to get those information and refer those issues to wherever it will be processed. We don't have a capacity to arrest people. We don't have a capacity to prosecute people, but we've got a capacity to get information that might assist those who will be afraid to go and report these issues. I think I've responded even to why it's targeting KwaZulu-Natal. On the issue of the court case and the impact on the, I don't think there will be any impact in terms of tensions. There are no tensions now. There is a court case. And we are talking about 29 branches. Some of them now, because they've changed even leadership. There's stability in those branches now. They are not talking about this case. It's individuals. So it's it's not there. Things have changed on what they were in November 2015. There's stability in most of these branches now. So we've got 878 branches, only 29 that took us. I'm just clarifying you because we have been saying it's 260. It's not 260 branches. It's 28 branches. 29 branches that took us to court. Represented by 4, because the other one is already withdrawn. There were 5. So if I might be repeating because the questions were, sort of similar. On the issue of the protection of our councillors, we rely on the assessment reports from law enforcement agencies. Once we get that report, then we normally go to the municipalities, because these are public representatives to assist. See, we are faced with a catch-22 situation, because when you are providing security to councillors, then other parties are saying, no, it's a waste of repairs money. Now, if there are people who are being killed, same organizations would be saying, no, ANC is doing nothing to prevent, to protect councillors. So, but we'll be guided by law in any provision of security. We must get an assessment and then refer that to a particular municipality. We won't have capacity as the ANC to protect councillors as the ANC, as the organization. We are an NGO organization. So it's like that. On the issue of the ANC Youth League, about the issue of power, it's part of these perceptions. That you see, what led us to call for a commission of inquiry, it was because of perceptions. So perceptions won't give us the desired result, because you can speculate. It's your thinking. It's not exactly what's happening. That's why we are saying there should be an investigation that will produce a conclusive a decision as to say, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. The Morana Commission, let's just wait for their report. But I think they are busy with the investigation. That's why we are saying all those who have information must appear before the commission and assist the commission to get facts that might provide them with a correct conclusive decision. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Nopala. Correct, let's go once. If there's any other burning questions, let's go once so that you won't be crying about the deadline because we happen to be late with 10 minutes, so they say it's us. If there's any other burning questions, we open the floor. Duplessis, there's Pungula and Gumede.
So I'm not sure if I missed it, but the names of the people who will be on the ANC's, the task teams investigating the killings. Just curious to know who are they? Who will they be? Will they be from the province, national? I didn't hear that question answered.
Pungula?
I think there's a bit of shifting of goalposts here when we talk about the issue of the death force. What as we know, the issue of this killing started back in 2011, where the ANC failed to manage the selection process of the councillor candidates. So So we saw the killing of Westbury and Shiva, the councillor, Mlazi, it continues anyway. The question is, why ANC has to rely on the advocates like Morane to tell so what's going on? So because now we see that the ANC investigation team that's going to do this. Now, I've spoken to some political analysts. They were asking me why the ANC has to wait for a commission, whereas it is clear that the commission will draw the book against us and you guys go back and sort of the mess. The question is why the ANC has to wait for that? Why the ANC is using the government commission instead of the ANC commission? Because it appears that and the party is agreeing that this should be an internal matter anyway.
Commander?
Yeah, with the ANC being riddled by factions, how can you guarantee the objectivity of those comrades who will be deployed to do the internal probe?
There's Peggy at the back. Bandra.
I think sometime this week when the PEC went to the home of the late Cindy Somakato, there was an incident whereby some members of the ANC tried to block some local leaders from entering the home. What is the ANC, because clearly that points to strained relations, either between two factions or between some members and the leadership. How are you intervening in that situation?
There's a last burning other question from Kumete.
Just that on the issue of Comrade Cindy Somakata, there is a phrase when we are saying Comrade Makata, we know that he had refused several times to leave the ANC when even a carrot of big positions were offered to him. Are you in a position to tell us who were those people who have been approaching him?
Okay. No, thanks very much. On the issue of names, I don't think we'll be in a position to give you names here. There is a team. It's important that it's an internal process. You must understand there is a team. It's a team of PEC members. So we don't want to destroy our processes internally. The shifting of goalposts, I don't think is correct. There is no goalpost that has been shifted here. We are saying, in addition to what we think, what we all say must be investigated, there is this other aspect that needs to be investigated. We're not saying leave the others and focus on the issue of and sponsored violence. So there's no shifting of goalposts. In fact, it's beefing up what needs to be investigated. Because we all want answers. So if you are looking for an answer, you must look broadly. Because you might say, it's because I disagree with you to say that why do we need a Morana Commission to tell us what we must do. We don't know what will be the conclusion of the Morana Commission. I don't know. Maybe you know. Because you are saying they'll tell us to go back and clean our issues. I know for a fact that some political parties have went there. If it was an internal process of the ANC, how would they get an opportunity or a platform to say what they wanted to say? I think it's unfair, even to come to a conclusion that this was what the commission will say. You'll be reducing this commission to say, no, this is the decision. We don't know what will be their decision. And let's allow the processes. These are very sensitive issues. I know that there is a victim. He's not within the ANC that appeared to the who is not a member of the ANC, who appeared in the Morana Commission. That victim was, if it was an ANC internal process, we were not going to afford the opportunity for that person to come forward. Please, and we are requesting that all of us must work towards finding a solution, other than not focusing on what you think and perception. That's what I'm saying. We are all focusing on perceptions, and we want to clean that mess. We must be able to say, this was a perception, this is the fact. On the issue of factions, I don't know whether a PEC, we want to tell us that the PEC of KwaZulu-Natal is a faction. It's a structure. It's a PEC task team. You can't say it's a faction. So it's a PEC that will be investigating those issues. It's not a faction. On the issue of some ANC members blocking leadership, I don't think there was anybody who was blocked there. Yes, there was a situation that is not good. Hence, we will be meeting with all our branches on Saturday at Mzimkhulu, just to say to them, we have lost a leader. We are all mourning. So can we be tolerant? We'll have to speak hard to our structures so that we prevent unnecessary issues there. On the issue of Comrade Makaka, we don't want to make a subject of Comrade Makaka, because you see, these allegations are made because they know that Comrade Makaka will not be in a position to respond. We are saying Comrade Makaka was a loyal member of the ANC. He died being an ANC. He was a deployed cadre of the ANC. Whoever wants to claim something else, it's trying to come up with the political issues that are not there. Can we allow Comrade Makaka, a loyal member of the ANC who died being an ANC member? We don't know the future. Now, what we all know, that Comrade Makaka died being an ANC member. He is our loyal cadre who refused to leave the ANC. And we'll be burying him as the ANC and give him a dignified funeral as an ANC loyal member. Thank you.
No, thanks very much, colleagues. I know, Comrade Bala, there are colleagues that want to get some clarity on certain issues, and there are those who want in vernacular language as well, to be left with you, while others maybe will be leaving us. We'll offer them that opportunity so that they will have whatever that they want to get as well. We thank you, comrades, for attending this briefing. I hope they will be with us on Saturday as well. I can assure you, after Nopala has announced that we are meeting the structures as well in Mzimkhulu, I'm sure there will be colleagues that will be interested to go to Mzimkhulu. Thank you very much. You want to start? Okay.
Ngisayakhona mina.